Chapter 399. The reason why Zhang Yan wanted to take in Yuan Yanhui and Wang Ziyuan was to recruit talents. He originally valued the aptitude of the two and did not expect much from them, but he did not expect Wang Ziyuan to give him a pleasant surprise. He subconsciously nodded. After all, these two were disciples that Elder Zhu had painstakingly cultivated. No matter how Elder Zhu's character was, he had a good eye for picking disciples. However, he still needed to see if they could be put in an important position. Zhang Yan faintly glanced at the two, flicked his sleeve and left without saying a word. Yuan Yanhui and Wang Ziyuan did not know what he meant. They were anxious and did not dare to leave. They knelt for a few hours. After Luo Xiao left, everything in the residence was handled by Shang Chang. After Zhang Yan left, she also left to take care of a few small matters. After walking one round, she returned to the main hall and saw the two still kneeling there. She suddenly felt a little sorry for them. With light steps, she approached them and said softly, "Please get up, the two of you. Master has always been decisive. If he wanted to punish you, he would have done it just now. Since Master didn't say anything, it means that he really didn't blame you." Shang Chang was an old acquaintance of the residence and her words were very trustworthy. Hearing this, Wang Ziyuan instantly heaved a sigh of relief and stood up. He cupped his hands and said gratefully, "Thank you, Madame Shang, for your advice." Shang Chang smiled gently and returned the greeting, "It's no big deal." Yuan Yanhui hurriedly stood up as well. She gently patted her plump chest and said, "Senior brother, Mansion Master's stern face really scared me to death." Wang Ziyuan did not blame her. He only smiled, "Junior Marshal sister, you must not be so reckless in the future. If you die, there will be no one to make a fuss in front of me. I will not be used to it." Yuan Yanhui blushed slightly and lightly punched him. Suddenly, she thought of something and widened her eyes. "Senior Marshal brother, how should we deal with those two?" Wang Ziyuan calmly thought for a while and said, "That person is our martial uncle after all. I can't kill him, but the other person insulted my master, so I won't let him off lightly." Yuan Yanhui had always trusted this Shixiang. She gave a heavy and said loudly, "Little sister will listen to Shixiang." After Zhang Yan left the great hall, he returned to the 12th main residence. He sat on the jade couch and calmed his heart monkey. He was ready to start cultivating the purple heaven thunderbolt. With a wave of his sleeve, he took out the bushel of amethyst gang sand and poured it all on the ground. It was like fine sand flowing down, piling up several feet high. In a split second, the room was filled with spiritual energy. His eyebrows and eyes were purple. There were several thousand grains of astral sand in this dipper. Normally, Yuanian cultivators would only occasionally go to the celestial pole to cultivate. Just now, they brought some back, so they didn't accumulate much astral sand. These in front of Zhang Yan were almost all the puppets that the Spiritual Machine Institute had accumulated for decades. The Spiritual Mechanism Institution was a place controlled by aristocratic families. If Hua Xian didn't want to do him a favor, he would still have to spend some effort to look for astral sand in other places. However, time was the least for him at the moment. From this point of view, aristocratic families obstructing him from obtaining astral sand could actually be considered to have grasped the situation. According to the method recorded in the Purple Heaven Thunderbolt, with a point of his finger, a grain of astral sand flew up. He activated his core evil chi and turned it into a blade. With a slash, the astral sand was immediately cut into two. As soon as the outer shell was broken, a purple brilliance impatiently flew out. "Look at this thing." With a shout, he activated his core evil chi and enveloped it. Leaning back, he inhaled this wisp of purple chi into his body through his mouth and nose. His body suddenly trembled. He only felt a strong and violent force running back and forth in his body, brutally colliding against each other. It stimulated his muscles and bones to the point of numbness. Just now, he suppressed it. Only when he completely subdued this chi dynamic did he operate his mysterious technique to dissolve it. He shook his head, chose another grain of astral sand, and did the same thing. After a few times, he frowned slightly and stopped. Within this astral sand, there was a sliver of the power of the extreme heaven's lightning. It was violent and hard to tame. Therefore, Every time he operated it, he had to suffer. Fortunately, his body was as hard as iron, so he could only treat it as nothing. If it was someone else, how could they endure it? That was not all. After each time he operated it, although he could dissolve most of the lightning qi, there was still a sliver of the most stubborn lightning that he couldn't dissolve. After a few times, it had accumulated. The more this qi accumulated, the more damage it would cause to the body. It was hard to imagine how shocking the lightning qi would be after he absorbed the thousands of purple thunder astral sand. Once it started to wreak havoc, he would probably die on the spot and not even his bones would be left. A look of thought appeared in his eyes. The sect's divine ability definitely couldn't be a method of death. There had to be a reason for this. He repeatedly looked at the technique that he had memorized a few times, but he still couldn't find a solution. After thinking for a while, he couldn't help but remember what the sect leader had said before. If there was anything he didn't understand in his cultivation, he could go and ask. He stood up and stepped out of the cave through the array door. Then he used his escape technique and flew toward the mountain gate. When he arrived at the great pool of Dragon Abyss, he activated the talisman and turned into a golden light that flew into the floating heavenly palace. The moment he entered the palace, the talisman seemed to be guided by something. It turned back to the side hall that he had been to before. After a few turns, it landed. He walked to the front of the main hall and bowed to the Taoist child on duty. He said, "Disciple Zhang Yan wishes to pay a visit to the sect leader. Please inform him." The Taoist child saw Zhang Yan and returned the greeting. He said, "Uncle Master Zhang, please wait for a moment. I will go and inform the sect leader." After a while, the Taoist child came back and said, "Uncle Master Zhang, the sect leader wants to see you." Zhang Yan stepped into the hall and saw sect leader Qin sitting on the jade platform. He hurriedly went forward and greeted, "Disciple Zhang Yan greets the sect leader. I came here today because I have a question that I have to ask the sect leader." Sect leader Qin smiled. "You chose the purple cloud's heavenly thunder art, so I knew you would come. Come forward." Zhang Yan took a few steps forward. When he got closer, the sect leader stretched out a finger and tapped on the center of his brows. In an instant, it was as if an endless mystical art was transmitted into his sea of consciousness. Sect leader Qin retracted his hand and waved his horsetail whisk. He said, "It is actually very easy to learn this lightning art. All you need to do is to refine a tool stone and purify the essence lightning. I have already taught you the method to refine this stone. Go back and focus on your cultivation." Since Zhang Yan had been taught the art, he had already achieved his goal. Seeing that the sect leader closed his eyes and did not say anything, he bowed and slowly left. After exiting the floating sky palace, he rode his sword and flew away. He carefully comprehended the art that the sect leader had taught him, and in an instant, he understood the profoundness within. So all things in the world were yin and yang, and the changes of the 5 elements were mutually reinforcing and restricting each other. The artifact stone was called Golden Essence Auspicious Stone. It was capable of suppressing vigorous and masculine aura, making it gentle and tame. The violent thunder aura within the stellar sand could be used by cultivators just by walking through it once. This art looked simple, but if no one taught it, the disciple would not be able to learn it. During the cultivation process, he would definitely suffer a lot. Even so, he might not be able to learn it. Zhang Yan couldn't help but think that what the sect leader taught him was obviously the secret art that the Qinsong school did not record in the books. The 10,000 years of inheritance of the Qinsong school did not seem to have such an art that could easily pass the test. Probably only the sect leader knew about it. Like Qi Yuntian, he probably knew many secret arts. Just now, he was able to learn many powerful Dao techniques. Thinking about that, Zhang Yan suddenly thought about the 12 abilities in the sect. Maybe they all had such a secret art. If he was trusted by the sect leader, he just needed to give him a few pointers and he would be able to avoid many detours. It seemed like he would have to ask for more help in the future. His traveling light flashed through the air. A moment later, he returned to clear darkness Sky Lake. He didn't head back to the main hall. Instead, he opened the formation door and entered the artifact crafting cave. He landed in front of the fish dragon cauldron and stopped. He chose a suitable one from the hidden flame seeds in the cauldron. He waved his sleeves and instantly the cauldron roared. It burned brightly. The golden essence auspicious stone wasn't hard to refine. With the experience of refining the life-protecting banner, he didn't need anyone's help and he could refine it himself. As for the tens of treasures needed to refine this item, it might not be easy for the other disciples to collect. However, to him, it was normal. The items that Gui Songyao left behind were enough. He cast a spell and ordered the mirror spirit to search for it while he sat on the futon. After a dozen breaths, the formation door opened and the mirror spirit stepped in. She bowed and said, "Master, everything you ordered me to find is here. Zhang Yan, bring it to me." The mirror spirit waved her hand and dozens of treasures flew into the air. Among them, there was mud, corundum, golden stone, strange jade, fine gold, and cave chi. Most of them belonged to the golden earth. Zhang Yan saw that everything mentioned in the technique was prepared and nothing was missing. He couldn't help but nod and said, "Zhang Jing, you watch the fire on the side. If there is any change in the fire, remember to remind me." The mirror spirit quickly responded. Zhang Yan used his hand to point a few times. First, he used a square of sand essence embryo as a guide and put it into the cauldron. Then he released a vigorous Dan Sha and drove the fire to refine it patiently. About 3 days and nights later, the body of the cauldron shook and there were sounds of impact coming from within. He knew that the embryonic stone had been formed and the evil pill continued to move. Then, according to the direction of the spell, he guided the dozens of precious materials and threw them into the fish-dragon treasured cauldron one after another. Another 7 days later, the cauldron shook, and white steam rose from the top of the cauldron and flowed out. Zhang Yan waved his hand and opened the door of the cauldron. He saw a piece of auspicious stone with sharp corners being carried in the air by the smoke, rolling around. He stretched out a finger and a sharp chi flew out, piercing into the stone. A loud sound was heard, and the stone cracked a few times. Countless pieces of rubble fell off, and in the end, a perfectly round jade stone the size of a baby's fist was revealed. Zhang Yan's spirit was refreshed. He flipped his palm and the Qing Jin auspicious stone fell into his palm. He held it in front of his eyes and looked at it carefully. He saw that the front and back of this object were like an ant's aperture. It was exquisite and crystal clear. He couldn't help but nod in satisfaction. If he had studied it carefully while he was refining it, it would have looked better. However, this was only used to refine his own thunder chi. The external appearance was not worth mentioning, so he didn't care very much. In short, it was fine as long as it didn't damage the effect. Carrying this auspicious stone, he got up and returned to the main hall to sit. He took out another grain of astral sand and opened it. After guiding the thunder chi into the stone, he slowly absorbed it into his body. This time, the thunder chi fruit was calm and docile, not as irritable as before. Not only that, after the lightning chi circulated, even the lightning that had accumulated in his body seemed to have been assimilated by it. Zhang Yan couldn't help but feel happy. He originally wanted to think of a way to get rid of the thunder chi. Now, he didn't have to waste any more effort. Looking at the pile of astral sand, he lightly shouted and the star's sword pellet flew out. In a flash, it turned into 16 sword lights and flew around. Under the control of his mind, they slashed at the purple astral sand. In the blink of an eye, 16 purple chi soared up. He opened his mouth and sucked in the 16 thunder chi into his body. He circulated his chi to harmonize it. Chapter 400. With the help of the golden essence auspicious stone, the lightning chi that entered his abdomen was already gentle and easy to move. Zhang Yan absorbed it into his Dan aperture and circulated it for an entire moment before completely absorbing the 16 bolts of lightning chi. Next, he followed the instructions of the technique and patiently operated the mysterious technique. However, this technique was very complicated. After an entire day, a glowing purple essence had accumulated in his abdomen. At this moment, Zhang Yan stopped. He looked at the thousands of grains of astral sand and pondered. According to this, if he wanted to completely absorb it, it would take about 3 months. However, this was only the first step. He gathered more and more of this essence qi until it filled his dantian aperture. Then he would try to circulate it again, slowly condensing it into a solid form and then breaking it apart. At this step, it was not over yet, he still had to gather it again. After repeating this process for 36 times, he could be considered to have achieved a small success and could circulate some of the power of thunder. Although the process seemed simple, the requirements were extremely harsh. Every time the essence was scattered and gathered, the amount of spiritual qi needed for the next time would be multiplied. At the later stage, the spiritual qi needed by a cultivator was like a whale swallowing the sea. Zhang Yan couldn't help but shake his head. This was worthy of being the second most powerful technique in his sect. If he didn't have the support of the heavenly abode, he wouldn't have to worry about the lack of spiritual qi. If he gave up halfway, who knew if he would be able to cultivate it in the end? He calculated in his heart. Under normal circumstances, every time the essence dissipated, it would take a cultivator about 5 to 6 years. 36 times, that would be more than 100 years. However, since he had decided to improve this technique when he was condensing the true seal, he didn't need to spend so much time. He just needed to have a small success before then. As for the complicated techniques, he had the help of the broken jade and could practice them in the outside world. Therefore, this wasn't a problem. He thought for a moment. After thinking through all the possible problems, he put his hand into his sleeve. His hand held the broken jade and sank into it. He went into seclusion for half a year. One day in the outside world was equivalent to more than 40 days in the jade. It was equivalent to him spending more than 20 years on this technique. When he withdrew his consciousness, he was already familiar with all the methods of using the violet firmament divine lightning. Next, he only needed to practice diligently. He flicked his sleeves. He made a gesture to summon the mirror spirit and said, "Is there anything important recently?" He was just asking casually. Cultivators had a long lifespan, and most of their time was spent meditating and cultivating in their sections. Otherwise, they would be looking for external items to cultivate. It's only been half a year, there shouldn't be anything urgent. Mirror spirit bowed and said, "Master, there is no movement in the mountain gate, I just heard it. A few days ago, a disciple of the Yuanyang sect named Ji Suihan was killed by someone, but we haven't found out who did it." Jihan? Zhang Yan also had some impression of this man's name. This man was also a rising star of the Yuanyang sect, a direct disciple of the Taoist Dongtian, and had a high position in the sect. He asked a few more questions. Only then did he know that when this disciple died, his protective clothes and magic treasures were all destroyed, and he even used up the magic talismans he used to escape, but he still failed to escape. Obviously, the killer was not an ordinary person. Mirror Spirit said again, "This seems to have angered the Taoist Dongtian of the Yuanyang sect, who sent a Yuanian cultivator and several disciples to search for him, but they haven't found anything yet." For some reason, the figures of the two disciples of the devil doctrine suddenly appeared in Zhang Yan's mind. He sneered slightly. It seemed that as the devil tribulation approached, some people were already unwilling to be left out. His eyes flickered slightly. Although his cultivation was extraordinary among his peers, it was still far from enough to deal with the devil tribulation. He gently waved his sleeves, and the mirror spirit understood. After bowing to him, she left. Zhang Yan got up and walked to the side. He looked up and saw that the 9 absorption magic slip was still like a cloud of mist. He used his mind to explore it, and found that the progress was much slower than he had expected. So far, only a quarter of the tailbone had been refined, and it seemed that he still had to wait for a long time. Zhang Yan's eyes became deep and serene. Then he would wait for another year, and by then he would have some power to protect himself. The plan now was to cultivate the purple cloud heavenly thunder with all his strength. While Zhang Yan was cultivating in seclusion, Huoxian came to the profound Water True Palace alone and said, "Go in and report that Huoxian wants to pay a visit to the eldest senior brother." Now he was the head of the 10 disciples, and his status was extremely high. Hearing this, the Taoist boy in front of the door didn't dare to slight him. After reporting, he led him to the main hall and sat down. Not long after, Qi Yuntian walked out, followed by Fan Changqing, who had a smile on his face as he followed closely behind. Huo Xian knew that Fan Chongqing was Qi Yuntian's confidant, so he wasn't surprised. After exchanging greetings, they sat down. After Huo Xian chatted with Qi Yuntian for a while, he changed the topic and said, "Eldest senior brother, have you heard that the Wei and South Liang kingdoms in the East Flower continent are filled with monstrous geniuses and devils? There's even a rumor that a fox demon has entered the palace to become a concubine." Although Qi Yuntian cultivated in the profound Water-True Palace, Fan Chongqing took care of the secular things, so he didn't shut his eyes and ears. He nodded and said, "I have heard of it." Huo Xian sighed and said, "In the past, there were Xianmen disciples who used their swords to slay demons, and such monsters couldn't stir up any trouble at all. But now that the demonic calamity is upon us, everyone is afraid. If this continues and we don't stop it, won't the human world become a land of ghosts? If there were demons wreaking havoc in the mortal world, there would be Xianmen disciples to slay them, and they wouldn't be able to cause any trouble. They didn't seem to be doing this to protect the mortals in their eyes, but they were afraid that the disciples of the devil sect would use this opportunity to cultivate some powerful demonic arts. If that happened, they would be next, so they had to take action. In the past, they weren't afraid, but now that the demonic calamity was approaching, in addition to the fact that Ji Suihan of the Yuanyang sect was killed a while ago, all the sects were shocked when they heard the news. Some small sects even sealed themselves in seclusion, and no one was willing to come out. As a result, the disciples of the devil sect became even more arrogant. It seemed like they were becoming more and more aggressive. Qi Yuntian thought for a while and said, "It's not appropriate for the Qinsong school to directly interfere in the mortal world." It was obvious that the devil sect was secretly testing them, and they might have some ulterior motives. Before their true intentions were revealed, a large sect like the Qinsong school obviously couldn't act rashly. Huo Xian also nodded in agreement and said, "Eldest senior brother's words make sense, and I think so too. However, we can't ignore this matter. Instead of sending a few capable disciples to kill the demons, it's better to support the small sects and let them be our vanguard." After talking for a long time, he finally said his purpose. He wanted to support the disciples of the small sects and let them pave the way for the Qinsong school to take chestnuts from the fire. The benefits were obvious and everyone could see it. However, Huo Xian understood. If this matter was to succeed, Qi Yuntian's support was indispensable. Qi Yuntian smiled and said, "Junior brother Hua, I already know what you mean. The day before yesterday, the sect master passed down a decree. He said that this matter will be decided by me." Huo Xian was shocked, but he quickly calmed down. Qi Yuntian was the eldest disciple of the third generation and the future leader of the Qinsong school. Sect Master Qin's decision was reasonable. He asked cautiously, "Eldest senior brother, what do you think?" He looked at Qi Yuntian's face. If this matter succeeded, he would be the first to benefit. However, he was from an aristocratic family. Would Qi Yuntian agree? If he was in this position, he would obviously try to suppress it. Success or failure. It all depended on this person's decision. Qi Yuntian did not beat around the bush. He laughed and said loudly, "If junior brother Hua can succeed, it will be a good thing. Why should I stop you?" At this moment, Huo Xian was also shocked. He could not help but stand up and stare at Qi Yuntian. Even with his shrewdness, he could not help but ask, "Eldest senior brother, are you really willing to help junior brother?" Qi Yuntian said seriously, "Junior brother Hua, haven't you heard of the saying, if a brother stands on the wall, he will defend himself? Don't worry and do it. I guarantee that no one will stop you." Huo Xian was also filled with emotions. He did not expect Qi Yuntian to be so generous. He took a deep breath and solemnly bowed to Qi Yuntian. Although he usually admired Qi Yuntian, it was mostly because of his cultivation. However, at this moment he really admired him. He said seriously, "Eldest senior brother, I will thank you first." However, he was also a person who knew when to advance and when to retreat. Putting aside his goal, Qi Yuntian had done him such a big favor and he should return the favor. He thought for a while and took the initiative to say, "If this matter is successful in those small sects, my Qinsong school will send capable disciples to oversee them and prevent them from acting on their own. Speaking of these disciples, there was a lot to be done. It could be decided by him and Qi Yuntian. If he could get the full support of the sect, then the gains of those disciples would be greater. Qi Yuntian smiled. He accepted this kindness calmly. Since Huoxian had achieved his goal, he did not stay any longer. After saying a few more words, he bid farewell to Qi Yuntian and flew away. After Huoxian left, Fan Chongqing looked out of the palace gate and turned around. He was puzzled and asked, "Eldest senior brother, why did you allow him?" Huoxian was now the top of the top 10 disciples. If there were no accidents, he would still be in this position for more than 100 years. If he was given good management, when he was fully fledged, he might become a threat to Qi Yuntian when he took over the position of sect master in the future. Qi Yuntian did not care and said, "I know junior brother Huo's plan. He wants to fight for the position of temple master in the future." The floating sky palace of Qinsong School was the most important place in the sect, and the 3 halls were also in it. The sect master was the temple master of the upper extreme hall. The temple master of the Duzhen Hall was a supreme elder and had always been on good terms with perfected Qinyu. As for the temple master of the Daylight Temple, he was originally an elder of an aristocratic family. However, he passed away 60 years ago and was now jointly held by the heads of the 4 aristocratic families. Fan Chongqing vaguely knew that the structure of the 3 halls seemed to be related to the cultivation secrets of the people in the heavens abode. However, he did not expect that Huoxian, who was the top of the top 10 disciples, had already thought so far ahead. Qi Yuntian said in a deep voice, "Junior brother Huo's ambition is not small. If he can really reach that step, why not help him?" Huoxian's attitude towards the aristocratic families was obvious. If it was not for the fact that the aristocratic families could not choose a person to replace him, he would have been pushed out long ago. Fan Chongqing thought for a while and said, "Eldest senior brother, if that's the case, I wonder which disciples should be sent? I can make arrangements as soon as possible." Qi Yuntian looked into the distance and said with a faint smile, "This matter can be discussed later. It's still too early to talk about it now. However, I already have a suitable candidate in mind." Fan Chongqing was startled. Immediately, an extraordinary and elegant Taoist figure flashed before his eyes. Chapter 401. After receiving Qi Yuntian's support, Huoxian's confidence increased greatly. After returning to the palace, he made some arrangements and secretly spread the news that he was going to support a few small outer sections. However, he wasn't sure which sect he was going to support, causing a lot of undercurrents. On this day, 2 cultivators, 1 male and 1 female, arrived outside the Great Lake of Dragon Abyss. They were both mystic light realm cultivators. One of them looked to be around 10 years old. He had a thin blue sash around his waist, and his hair was casually tied into a bun instead of a scarf. The bottom of his Taoist robe was hidden in a pair of boots, and his movements were very casual. As for the woman, she was dressed in a palace robe with cloud-like hair. Her appearance was beautiful, and compared to the young cultivator's carefree attitude, she appeared even more dignified. The young cultivator looked at the vast Great Lake of Dragon Abyss. The water and sky merged into one, the egrets flew across the sky, and the verdant islands were like stars in the sky, faintly discernible in the vast mist. He widened his eyes and shouted, "So this is the Yutsong sect. It's much bigger than my blue feather pavilion." The beautiful female frowned slightly and said, "Little brother, if you see Huo Zhenren later, remember to be careful with your words and actions. Don't be so frivolous." The young cultivator instantly became impatient and said, I know. At this moment, a flying boat flew over and arrived in front of them. The supervising disciple looked at the 2 and said coldly, "Where did you 2 come from?" Although he was only at the Light Qi realm, he didn't put them in his eyes at all. Once the news of Huoxian supporting a small sect was spread out, many disciples came to ask about it. Many came over the past few days. In the past, the supervising disciple was very free, but he was very annoyed over the past few days, especially after the incident with Ji Suihan from the Yuanyang sect. He was afraid that the disciples of the demonic Dao sect would also be involved, so he didn't have a good expression on his face. The siblings had also been to the Southern Flower sect before. The disciple on duty also had a cold expression, and the two had been told to be careful with their words and actions, so they didn't mind. The female walked lightly on the mystic light. Wan Fu bowed and said, Yen Xie of the Blue Feather Pavilion and my brother Yen Xiaoyang are here to visit Huozhenren of Qinsong School. Yen Xiaoyang added on from the side, we had previously sent a letter to Spiritual Master Hua. It was you who summoned us here. So you're here to see Spiritual Master Hua. When the managing disciple heard the meaning of the words, it seemed that these two people had some friendship with Huoxian. His expression immediately eased up a little, and he cupped his hands and said, so it turns out to be old friends of Taoist Hua. I wonder if you have proof? The siblings had been prepared for this. Yen Xie took out a talisman from her pouch and placed it in her pale palm. He handed it over to the managing disciple. Although Huoxian wanted to support the small sects, he also knew that this matter could not be accomplished overnight. He still needed these sects to send their disciples to discuss matters, but he was also afraid that they would collude with one another. Therefore, he had only sent letters to 3 sects, and the Biyu Pavilion was one of them. In the past, if Bai Yuxuan heard such news, he would not be willing to pay attention to it at all. However, when the demonic tribulation started, they were from the celestial sect of wonders. If they did not rely on a large tree, they might be annihilated in the blink of an eye. Therefore, after the sect master and the elders of the sect discussed, they decided to send the 2 of them to investigate. The managing disciple did not dare to be careless. He grabbed the talisman and carefully examined it. After confirming that it was real, he returned the talisman. He cupped his hands and said, excuse me. The siblings did not dare to be arrogant, and they also returned the courtesy, saying that it was fine. Yen Xie asked for guidance. We do not know the way. May I ask, Taoist, where should we go to see Spiritual Master Hua? The managing disciple said, you can go east and see a mountain that looks like a brush stand. Go to the mountain peak and find an elder surnamed Zheng. He will naturally guide you. Yen Xie hurriedly said, thank you for your guidance, Taoist. The managing disciple did not say anything else. He turned the flying vessel around and turned behind an island peak, disappearing in the blink of an eye. The 2 of them searched for a way and flew eastward. After traveling for less than 20 miles, they saw a mountain that looked exactly like the pen rack. On the peak of the mountain, there was a temple with red walls and green tiles. Several colorful peacocks were looking for food in front of the temple. Yen Xiaoyang couldn't help but laugh. This mixed peacock was originally a high-grade creature, but it has been raised to the point where it has lost all its spirituality. It must have never accumulated any virtue in its past life, which is why it followed the wrong master. Yen Xie was displeased. She glared at him and said, just now I've taught you a lesson. How can you forget it in the blink of an eye? Yen Xiaoyang shut his mouth resentfully. That peacock was actually not that bad. It was just that Baiyu Yuxian's spirit-nurturing art was far inferior. However, his words were loud enough to be heard by the master of the temple. A beam of profound light surged, and a Daoran walked out. He cupped his hands and said, where have you come from? Yen Xie hurriedly said, we are here to see Spiritual Master Hua. Just now, we've received the guidance of the managing disciple. We are here to find Elder Chen. That Daoran said indifferently, I am Elder Chen. Since you are looking for Spiritual Master Hua, you must be here for that important matter. However, Spiritual Master Hua is currently receiving guests, so I'm afraid he has no time to spare. You can go see Senior Brother Fang Zhenlu. He is the Vice-Chancellor of the Spiritual Mechanism Institute. He can take care of this matter. The siblings didn't suspect anything. They first asked for the directions, thanked him, and then left. Daoran looked at their backs and sneered. He retracted the profound light and landed in the temple. After the Yen siblings arrived at the Spiritual Mechanism Institute, they reported their names. After a while, they were invited in. They saw a handsome young Taoist in a white robe and a tall hat sitting in the hall. They went up to greet him. Fang Zhenlu sized them up. He did not invite them to sit. He only frowned and said, you are the disciples of Biyu Pavilion? Yen Xie said carefully, yes. The sect master is my daughter's mother. In Fang Zhenlu's eyes, even if the sect masters of these small sects came personally, he would not care, let alone 2 mere disciples. He said coldly, "According to what I know, the founder of Bu Pavilion was a disciple of Nanhua sect. He had to deal with the 1,000-year devil tribulation. Why did you come to my Qinsong school instead of the Nanhua sect?" Previously, he was defeated by a boy from Shaoqing sect and lost all face. It was all thanks to Zhang Yan that he got rid of the trouble. Later, Huoxian received orders from the Chun clan to try to restore some of his reputation. That was why he was sent to Yaoyin Mountain. He felt that there would be no problems this time, but in the end, he still ended up with a strong start and a weak finish. Not only did he use the protective talisman that spiritual Master Chen gave him, he did not even know how he escaped. Thus, he was blamed by the Chen clan. Fortunately, he and Huoxian were the son-in-law of the Chen clan. Under their care, he could be considered to have a part in supporting the small sect. However, as Chen Feng's cultivation became more and more profound, there were rumors in the Chen clan that he would be replaced in the next competition. In addition, Madame Chen scolded him at home every day. He was also depressed. Facing these two, he did not have a good expression and spoke very rudely. Yan Xiaoyang revealed a bit of annoyance. Yan Xia's expression did not change. She said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "Senior apprentice brother Fang, please allow me to report. Although my sect's ancestral master was an elder of the Southern Flower sect, it has already been several hundred years since he left. Even if we had some friendship in the past, it has long since disappeared with the passing of Senior. Moreover, my mother and I have previously exchanged letters with spiritual Master Hua. It is just now that I have this trip." Fang Zhenlu was not satisfied with these words at all. If he helped Bu Xian, what would he do if he helped the Southern Flower sect? He would inevitably be scolded by the Chen clan again. Right now, he did not seek to gain merit, only to avoid making mistakes. Thus, he said, "Senior apprentice brother Hua has been very busy recently and has no time to see you. Please return in a few days." Finished speaking, he did not give the two a chance to speak at all. He actually stood up and swaggered off just like that. At this time, a servant from the Spiritual Mechanism Institute came up and gestured for the siblings to leave. He said, "You too, please." The Yen siblings had no choice but to leave. After leaving the Spiritual Mechanism Institute, Yan Xiaoyang had nowhere to vent his anger. Even he could hear the perfunctory tone in Fang Zhenlu's words. He clenched his fists and said, "This person is too rude. My Bu Xian may be a small sect, but it does not mean that Qinsong School can order us around." Yan Xia sighed. Regardless of whether they succeeded or failed, if they returned without even seeing Huoxian, it would be too inexcusable. Her thoughts spun a few times. Suddenly, her beautiful eyes lit up. She turned around and grabbed Yan Xiaoyang's hand. She said resolutely, "Little brother, let's go." Yan Xiaoyang said in confusion, "Sister, are we going to return just like that? But how are we going to explain this to mother?" A strange light appeared in Yan Xia's beautiful eyes. She said, "Who said we're going back? I don't believe it. The Qinsong School is so big that we can't find a suitable person to talk to. Let's go find senior brother Zhang Yan. In terms of ranking in Qinsong School, he is even above Fang Zhenlu." Yan Xiaoyang was startled. He couldn't help but come to a realization. He said happily, Right. Senior brother Zhang is so amazing. He will definitely be able to help us." Meanwhile, within the main hall of the clear nether heavenly lake, the rumbling of thunder reverberated throughout the abode. In the palm of Zhang Yan, a purple bolt of lightning as thick as a finger flickered and leaped about. It shot out dozens of feet, twisting back and forth as if it wanted to fly out. From time to time, it would crackle, leaving behind faint scorch marks wherever it passed. Another half a year passed in the blink of an eye. After he repeatedly evolved it in the damaged jade, the obstruction of the technique circulation was no longer a problem for him. In this 1 year, the mass of essence energy in his abdomen had been scattered and reassembled 12 times. Now, he could slightly circulate the power of thunder, but it was still not enough to fight with others. Divine arts weren't easy to cultivate. After 36 revolutions, He could just now unleash the might of divine thunder, so he needed at least another 3 years. He clenched his fist, and with a paw sound, the lightning scattered in all directions. He stood up and turned around to check on the 9 subduing demon slip. Although it was still shrouded in mist, it was much smaller than before. He paid close attention for a moment and discovered that there was still a small piece of bone that hadn't melted, but it wouldn't take long. He smiled slightly and sat back down on the couch. He was about to continue silently circulating his technique when he saw a flash of light. The mirror spirit walked out from the door and said, "Master, there is a man and a woman outside the abode. They say they are old friends of Master and wish to enter the abode to pay their respects." When Zhang Yan heard this, he reached out his hand and brushed the small mirror. The scene outside the abode was immediately reflected in. He took a glance and saw the 2 sisters. He couldn't help but be surprised. After a little calculation in his mind, he revealed a meaningful smile and said, "It really is 2 old friends. Zhang Jing, go and welcome them in. Don't neglect them." Chapter 402. Zhang Yan was not in a hurry to see the Yan siblings. He sent out a decree, and not long after, Lu Junbai entered the hall and asked, "May I know why Manor Head is summoning me?" Ever since Lu Junbai followed his sister, White Sky Demon King Lu Mainyang, into the manor, he felt that he had improved greatly. Compared to the barren land of the outer endless sea, his cultivation speed was many times faster. This was especially true for Lu Mainyang. Before she came here, she had received some pointers from spiritual Master Tao. In the past few years, she had already shown signs of breaking through to the nascent soul stage. Thus, she cherished the opportunity in front of her even more. She was also very respectful towards the Manor Lord Zhang Yan. When she heard the summons, she did not dare to delay for even a moment and immediately rushed over. Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Today, an old friend has come to visit. Since you know him, you should go and entertain him first." Lu Junbai was a little surprised. Although he had many friends, most of them were in the outer endless sea. Could it be the Yen clan of the North Star faction? But he should have invited his sister Lu Mainyang as well. Why was he the only one going? Zhang Yan also received news recently and understood what Huxian wanted to do. He had a strong premonition that he would definitely be involved. However, there was no need for him to go personally. It was enough to send a disciple, and it would not cause any resentment. Thus, he was particular about which sect to choose. That day, the Yen siblings were kidnapped by the younger brother of White Sky Demon King. Today, he was called to welcome them to show the strength of the manor and lay the groundwork for the future. He walked out with a stomach full of doubts. When he reached the hall and saw the Yen sisters, both were startled. Yen Xiaoyang subconsciously jumped up. He wanted to take out his talisman, but the moment he put his hand into his sleeve, he came to a realization. He opened his eyes wide and said, "Strange, why are you here?" Lu Junbai immediately understood Zhang Yan's intention. He could not help but smile bitterly. He came forward and cupped his hands, saying, "So it is you siblings. That day, I did not ask for the truth. It was my mistake to kidnap the 2 of you to the outer endless sea. I apologize to the 2 of you." When Yen Xia saw this person appear here, she immediately thought of a possibility. She hurriedly bowed and said, "Please don't say that, Taoist Lu. Didn't Demon King Lu release us later on? He even gave us a few pointers and we learned a lot from him. Speaking of which, I still have to thank Taoist Lu for giving us this opportunity." Lu Junbai sighed. "It's good that the 2 of you don't mind." Seeing the 2 of them looking at him, he paused for a moment before continuing, "This Lu is currently a guest of Bright Nether Palace. Just now, Manor Head Zhang ordered me to come receive the 2 of you." He came out just like that. When the Yen sisters saw that the Demon King who had captured them and their brother had also surrendered to Zhang Yan, they were not surprised. Instead, they were happy. They looked at each other and felt even more confident. They felt that they could ask Zhang Yan for help. It seemed like he was on the right track. After the 3 of them conversed for a while, Zhang Yan finally walked out. The Yen siblings hurriedly rose to their feet and bowed. Zhang Yan clasped his hands behind his back and said with a smile, "It's been a long time since we last met in North Star City. What brings the two of you to my residence today? Yan Xia curtsied. She then stated the reason for her visit. Zhang Yan smiled. Do the two of you wish to see senior apprentice brother Hua? Yan Xia sighed. Senior apprentice brother Fang isn't willing to introduce us. After thinking about it, Manor Head Zhang is the only old acquaintance of us in Qinsong School, which is why we took the liberty of coming to your residence. Zhang Yan smiled inwardly. Since there was such a reason, if he brought the two of them along, Fang Zhenlu might think that he was intentionally trying to humiliate him. However, he did not take this to heart at all. Not to mention that Fang Zhenlu was ranked behind him. Just based on the recent rumors, he knew that this person was having a hard time. It was hard to say whether or not he would be able to sit in the top 10 disciples during the next large competition. Thinking of this, he suddenly changed his mind. If Fang Zhenlu were to leave his position, who would replace him? While he was calculating, Yan Xia saw that he didn't say anything for a long time, so she somewhat misunderstood him. She thought that he was in a difficult position, and she couldn't help but sigh in her heart. She thought to herself, that's true. I heard that Hua Xian is a disciple of an aristocratic family, and also a son-in-law of the Qin clan. Even if Manor Head Zhang is also one of the 10 great disciples, he might not be able to meet just because he wants to. Thinking of this, her eyes dimmed, and a hint of disappointment could be heard in her voice. She said, if Manor Lord Zhang makes things difficult for me, then forget it. Zhang Yan laughed and said, who said it's difficult? This matter is easy, please come with me. He rolled up his sleeves and turned into a wisp of smoke that wrapped around the two of them. Then he left the clear Serenity Lake and flew towards the great pool of Dragon Abyss. Yan Xia felt her body become light, and she left the clear Serenity Lake. Looking down, she saw the scenery around her constantly flying past. It was obvious that they were flying extremely fast. She couldn't help but compare him with her mother, and the result shocked her. She thought to herself, Mother is at the 3rd level of the core transformation realm, but judging from her speed, she is far inferior to this Manor Head Zhang. Moreover, I can see that he hasn't used his full strength yet. As expected of someone who has formed a grade 1 core. Qinsong is a great profound sect. I really can't underestimate them. However, Yan Xiaoyang didn't think so much. He only felt that this kind of flying was extremely carefree, far faster than his profound light. He shouted loudly. Zhang Yan released his core fiend and soared into the sky. From afar, he could see a rolling cloud of smoke flying across the sky. When the supervising disciples saw the scene in the cloud, they recognized Zhang Yan, one of the top 10 disciples. They naturally didn't dare to stop him, and they all moved to the side. The Yan sisters followed Zhang Yan all the way here. Whenever they saw a cultivator flying on clouds, they would respectfully stand to the side and let him go first. They couldn't help but look at Zhang Yan a few more times, and they had a better understanding of his status in Qinsong School. After a while, Zhang Yan pointed ahead and said, you too, the 10 Peaks Mountain is in front of us. It's where senior brother Hua cultivates. The Yan sisters had long heard of the 10 Peaks Mountain's name, and they hurriedly looked into the distance. Under the cold jade, they saw 10 majestic peaks forming a circle. One of them was clearly a level higher than the other 9 peaks. It stood tall like a mountain, and its aura was extraordinary. It was surrounded by a misty sea of clouds, and on the peak, there was a high platform built from jade. When Zhang Yan got close, he stomped on the ground. Smoke scattered, and the two of them slowly floated down from the clouds. They landed in front of an unremarkable cave. After their feet touched the ground, Yan Xia hurriedly tidied up her attire and stroked her hair. Yan Xiaoyang had just had his fill of flying on the clouds, and he was still a bit unsatisfied. He curiously looked around, and when he saw that the surrounding terrain was narrow and cramped, and that the nearby cave was unremarkable, he couldn't believe it. He said, is this spiritual master Hua's residence? Zhang Yan took a step forward and said loudly, Senior brother Hua, Zhang Yan has come to visit. The sound of laughter rang out, and Hua Xian walked out from the cave. He swept his gaze around and said, these two are? He wore a Taoist robe made of coarse cloth, and there wasn't a single ornament on his body. If one were to look at him from the outside, They wouldn't be able to tell that he was any different from an ordinary cultivator. However, just by standing there, he gave off the feeling of a tall mountain. The Yen siblings in particular stopped breathing, and they couldn't help but want to take a few steps back. Yen Xia forced herself to calm down and walked forward, bowing, and said respectfully, "Yen Xia and Yen Xiaoyang of Blue Feather Pavilion greet spiritual master Hua." Hua Xian's expression was calm. He nodded and said, "So it's two fellow Taoists from Blue Feather Pavilion. There's no need to be so courteous." Zhang Yan spoke from the side. These two fellow Taoists originally wanted to pay their respects to senior brother, but they couldn't find a way. "They are old acquaintances of mine, so I brought them here." Hua Xian pondered for a moment and roughly understood what had happened. He looked at Zhang Yan and cupped his hands, saying, "It was my lack of consideration. I have troubled junior brother Zhang." Zhang Yan returned the greeting with a smile and said, "Since I've brought them here, I still have to return to the sect to cultivate, so I won't stay here for long. Senior brother Hua, you too, farewell." As he finished speaking, a cloud of smoke rose beneath his feet, and his body rose into the sky. He cupped his hands again in the air, and then with a flash of sword light, he flew away without a trace. Hua Xian didn't invite the Yen siblings into the cave, and spoke on the mountain peak. His attitude was amicable, and he spoke with a smile, not putting on the airs of a disciple of a great sect in the slightest. However, the more he acted like this, the more Yen Xia felt that this person was extraordinary. She became even more careful with her words, afraid that she would say something wrong. Even Yen Xiaoyang, who was previously frivolous, held his breath and stood to the side. The three of them talked for more than 2 hours, and only then did the Yen siblings bid farewell and leave. After exiting Qinsong School, Yen Xiaoyang suddenly said, "Sister, if this matter really succeeds, I would rather Manor Head Zhang come to our sect to preside over this matter." One of the conditions that Hua Xian mentioned just now was to send a disciple of Qinsong School to oversee their sect, and there was no room for discussion at all. Yen Xiaoyang had a rather good impression of Zhang Yan. Regardless of Zhang Yan's true intentions, the Yen siblings had at least received a certain amount of courteous treatment on the surface. Especially with Fang Zhenlu as a comparison, it made them seem more and more important. If he couldn't refuse this condition, he would rather it be Zhang Yan who came. Yen Xia smiled and said, "Whether this matter succeeds or not still depends on mother's decision. Little brother is thinking too early. We should hurry back and report this matter to mother." Yen Xiaoyang curled his lips and said, "If mother doesn't want to, there's no need to send us siblings at all. Just send 1 or 2 senior brothers. The 3 elders won't let us leave the sect at all. I think this matter will most likely succeed." Yen Xia glanced at her little brother in surprise. She felt rather gratified and thought to herself, although little brother's temperament is jumpy, I do understand this point. The reason why mother had them come and not the other disciples is to show her sincerity. Their father was an elder of Jade Feather Pavilion, but he had passed away a long time ago. Their mother was the sect master, Yen Qing. She had lived for more than 400 years, and it wouldn't be long before she approached the juncture of life and death. When news of this spread from Qinsong School, Yen Qing immediately felt that this was an opportunity, which was why she had sent her son and daughter here. She was also well aware that Qinsong School was preparing to use them to resist the devil sect. Hua Xian could be said to have handled this matter in an open and above-board manner. He didn't hide anything in his letter. What he meant in his letter was that he wanted them to come and work for him. Otherwise, why would he come looking for them? Whether they were willing or not, there was no need to force it. In the past, she wouldn't have been willing either, but the problem was that once the devil tribulation came, it wasn't something that could be avoided even if one wanted to. Rather than that, it was better to be tied to Qinsong School. Perhaps they could even exchange for a chance at Yuaning. Chapter 403. The sun rose and the moon set. Winter and summer alternated. After Zhang Yan introduced the Yen sisters to Hua Xian that day, he went back to cultivate in seclusion and did not care about the outside world. Another 2 years passed in the blink of an eye. In these 2 years, other than the disciples of small clans coming to visit Hua Xian, Qinsong School was as peaceful as ever. In the Donghua continent, The kingdom of Wei was in chaos. The Northwest Hu tribe invaded the border, and rebellions broke out everywhere. Bandits and evildoers ran rampant. It was a scene of chaos. In the small pot mirror, Zhang Yan sat on the top of the bamboo building. He did not speak or move. Outside the house, the bamboo swayed and rustled. The water in the pond rippled slightly. A few golden carps jumped out of the water from time to time, splashing colorful water droplets. After a long time, he opened his eyes, and a bright light burst out from his eyes. Then he shouted loudly and pointed his finger. Lightning burst out, and with a rumbling sound, it was like a thunderbolt in a drought. Amidst the purple light, half of the bamboo forest outside the house was forcibly destroyed by him. The bamboo leaves that filled the sky scattered down, and on the ground, there was already a deep pit that was a few feet wide. Zhang Yan looked at it and nodded with satisfaction. He had passed the 36 turns of the heavenly thunder of purple cloud, and he had made some progress. The power of the godly thunder was indeed not to be trifled with. Moreover, the good thing about this technique was that it followed the circulation of the inner qi. Its power could be big or small. Just now, he had only used a little bit of Dan Sha and it had already made a mess of the place. If he used all his strength, the power of the technique would be even greater. Fortunately, everything in the small pot mirror was a world of its own. As long as the spiritual qi was not exhausted, it would not take long for everything to return to its original state. He stood up and folded his sleeves behind him. He stepped out of the small pot mirror, and as soon as he came out, he looked to the side. In these 2 years, he had not come out of the small pot mirror. Now that he looked over, he noticed that the 9 subduing devil slip had already completely refined the Wurm tail, and it had transformed into a jade slip that emanated brilliant light and overflowed with multicolored light as it floated there silently. As if it had sensed his arrival, the magic slip did not wait for a call. It flew into his hand with a clear sound. Zhang Yan held it in his hand, his eyes filled with joy. He said, "It's been about 3 years, but it's finally here." Patriarch Tai Heng's thousands of years of cultivation base had been drained by the flood dragon's tail. Even though half of it had dissipated in the past 10,000 years, it still hadn't dissipated. Much of it was swallowed by the 9 absorption demon taming slip, but it was enough for him to cultivate to the 4th level of the divine contract. With the jade slip in hand, there was naturally no need to delay any further. He sat cross-legged on the jade couch and pointed. The jade slip throbbed and transformed into a streak of light that flew into his glabella. He used his mind to guide the simplified body into the aperture acupoint and lightly trembled. Then, it turned into a ball of mist and suddenly expanded. In just a moment, an unfathomable stream of essence qi poured into his body. This essence qi was simply too vast. It actually caused his body to tremble. He hurriedly used the divine contract to calm his mind. While calming his essence qi, he sent it into the acupoints that needed to be channeled. At the same time, he used his mind to slow down the 9 absorption demon taming slip. However, it came so quickly that even the jade slip could not control it. It let out a series of whistling sounds, but it could not stop the essence qi. In an instant, the joints in his body crackled. His blood surged like a tide, his skin was boiling like fire, and blood was already seeping out of the acupoints on his body. When Zhang Yan looked at the 4th level of the technique, he knew that he would definitely encounter some obstructions in this test. He calmly straightened out his aura and ceaselessly circulated his profound art to suppress this aura, and his injuries gradually healed. After maintaining this for a full 12 hours, the essence qi finally eased up and he could slowly control it with his mind. As he continued to use the divine contract, the essence qi gradually condensed into mercury and poured into each acupoint. After refining more than 20 main acupoints, he suddenly felt that his body was as heavy as lead. With a cracking sound, the jade couch under his body actually had circles of cobweb-like cracks. It seemed that it could not withstand the force and was about to collapse. The mirror spirit hiding in the small pot mirror immediately noticed the abnormality. At this time, she turned around and pointed at the jade couch in time. The jade couch immediately stopped falling apart, and then looked at Zhang Yan with a somewhat nervous expression. He stood in the same place and thought for a moment. Then he waved his hand and operated the formation to protect the cave house, in case there was any change in time. Zhang Yan's eyes were closed, and his essence qi was faintly discernible. He sat there like a stone statue, as if he was unaware of the outside world. Although the essence qi that entered his body was violent at first, it was still easy to move. But now, because of the changes, every movement felt like he was moving a 10,000-kilogram boulder, so he had to move it slowly. Every time he moved through an acupuncture point, he had to use up a lot of energy, and he felt a sense of exhaustion. Fortunately, he knew that he could not rush it. With full patience and sincerity, he squeezed the essence qi and slowly moved through the acupoints, changing the internal acupoints. After more than 30 days, all the acupoints in his body had been moved. At this time, his body suddenly shook, and he slowly floated up from the couch. At this moment, the essence qi actually changed again. This time, it was no longer sluggish and heavy. Instead, it was light, graceful, and unfathomable. Strands of it scattered throughout his limbs and bones. Even though the previous heavy and turbid qi was difficult to move, at least there were traces to follow, and it could not run away. But now, he had to search for the scattered qi activity all over his body, and this was even more difficult to accomplish than before, because it would swim everywhere like a fish. At this point, he couldn't be impatient. Zhang Yan held his breath and concentrated his mind. He didn't think about anything else. He only cared about searching his body, searching for the qi, capturing all the scattered light qi and collecting it, even if he didn't miss a single strand of it. He searched everywhere in his body. As more and more essence qi was collected, there was a strange feeling in his heart, as if he had a deeper understanding of his body. All kinds of subtle changes were clear in his heart. His body also grew taller and taller in this kind of cultivation, and gradually reached the top of the cave house. The mirror spirit did not want Zhang Yan to be hindered, so she gave a low shout and made a gesture to expand the cave house. After more than 30 days, Zhang Yan also successfully took this step. At this time, all the essence qi flowed out from the aperture, stirring like a tide, like 100 rivers converging into the sea, and gathered under the abdomen. Zhang Yan looked inside and saw that the essence qi finally gathered in one place, like a lake of light, in a dantian aperture. It was written in the spirit comprehending contract that as long as this mass of essence qi was dispersed, and then it ran through the aperture of the whole body, he could achieve the 4th level of spirit comprehending contract in a flash. However, just when he was about to move, his body trembled slightly. He vaguely felt that if he took this step, some kind of calamity would fall upon him. This was an extremely mysterious thought. He couldn't tell where it came from, but it just gushed out from the bottom of his heart. Zhang Yan was a cautious person, and he would not take unnecessary risks. He pondered for a moment, stopped his movement, and thought to himself, although that sense of vigilance came inexplicably, it will not be without reason. There must be a reason. He thought for a while, then reached into his sleeve and held the broken jade. He decided to use the deduction method to find out the truth. His mind sank into it, and after a few hours, he withdrew from it with a thoughtful look on his face. Just now, he had deduced and found that once he took this step, it would definitely cause a great commotion. Not to mention this, in the cave house of Clear Nether Heavenly Lake, there was the protection of the formation, so he didn't need to worry about others noticing. But the key was that after reaching the 4th level, even his appearance and aura had changed slightly, and he didn't know if he could hide it in a short period of time. This was an ancient demonic cultivation method. The younger disciples might not be able to tell anything, but the powerful cultivators, such as the people from the heavenly abode, could tell at a glance. If they felt something was wrong, they might come to kill the demon. Zhang Yan thought about it and smiled. To him, this matter was actually not a big deal. The reason why he had spent so much effort to cultivate this cultivation technique was so that he could protect himself and his life when the devilish tribulation arrived. Before he reached the nascent soul stage in the Tao of Qi, it would naturally be for the best if he didn't take that step. Since he could take this step at any time, of course he didn't need to be anxious. But if it really came to a life and death situation, then he didn't need to worry so much. He could only think about saving his life first. However, there was still a doubt in his heart that hadn't been solved. He couldn't help but think to himself, that sense of calamity, I wonder where it came from. He thought about it carefully and gradually remembered something. He remembered that when he first entered the demonic treasury, there was an inscription that said, "Those who cultivate this Tao will have a calamity from the heavens." Lu Gu once thought that the calamity should be on the cultivator who cultivated this Tao, while Zhang Yan thought that the cultivator himself was the calamity of entering the world. He wasn't sure which was right and which was wrong. Maybe it was a combination of both? If this was the case, he had to be cautious. He wasn't afraid of calamity, but at least he had to be fully prepared before it happened. The mirror spirit saw that Zhang Yan finished cultivating and reported, "Master has been cultivating in seclusion for 3 years, and there are many visitors outside." Zhang Yan said in a deep voice, "Is there anything in the mountain gate?" The mirror spirit said, "There is no such thing. Those visitors are all disciples of small sections. Some of them even said that they have met Master once." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "I still have to cultivate now, so I don't have time to spare. Remember their names and wait for me to come out from seclusion." The mirror spirit nodded. Zhang Yan waved his sleeves, lowered his breath, and slowly floated down from the top of the cave house. Now that he had the capital to protect himself, then he had to consider how to condense the true seal of spiritual power. But before that, he had to cultivate the 5 elements true light completely. He waved his sleeves and a jade dipper flew out. It was filled with the first and second wood essence chi that Hibiko Higashi gave him. According to his plan, he would first spend a few years to cultivate the wood elemental true light, and then use the 9 numbers sutra to reverse the cultivation method. Based on his previous experience in condensing the water elemental true light and the earth elemental true light, he roughly estimated that it would take him about 10 years. Thinking of this, his expression changed. At that time, his eldest disciple, Lu Yenni, would most likely return. Chapter 404. A 30-meter-long jet black profound light streaked across the sky, heading towards the clear nether heavenly lake. Luo Xiao rode on the wind, parting the clouds, and flew with all her might. In her arms, there was a 5 or 6-year-old boy with pink and jade-like makeup. Behind her, there were 2 gusts of evil wind chasing after her. Even though they were several kilometers away, she could still vaguely hear the angry curses coming from them. However, she turned a deaf ear to them as she continued to activate the profound light and fly forward. Not long after, the clear nether heavenly lake was already in sight. She glanced at it and revealed a happy expression, hugging the boy in her arms even tighter. The 2 people behind her were not simple either. She did not want to return to the clear nether heavenly lake directly, afraid that she would cause trouble for Zhang Yan. She wanted to take a detour before returning. However, these 2 people were chasing too closely, and she could not get rid of them at all. Since she came from the northern nether continent, she had not slept or rested, flying continuously for 29 days. If not for the fact that she had enough pills on her, she might not have been able to hold on. Even so, the pills had been used up yesterday, and she was close to the point where she could not hold on at any time. Seeing that the 2 of them were still as strong as before, and did not seem to be tired at all, she sighed and completely gave up on this thought. In the next moment, she arrived in front of the mountain protection formation, formed a seal, and jumped into it. Seeing that her figure had disappeared into the formation gate, the 2 gusts of evil wind immediately stopped in their tracks. After circling around once, they flew to a hill in the distance. Then they dropped down, revealing the figures of 2 strong men. These 2 demon cultivators were dressed in the same way. Their upper bodies were half naked, and they were full of muscles. Their waists were wrapped with a silk belt that was as wide as a palm, and big red tassels hung down. Their lower bodies were dressed in an iron chain skirt, and they wore thick-soled high boots. They looked incomparably fierce. They were both core transformation level cultivators. Although they were a realm higher than Luo Xiao because they cultivated the path of strength, their flying speed was not much faster. To be able to chase Luo Xiao all the way here, they could be considered to have used up all their strength. One of the cultivators with buck teeth and a face full of reddish-brown hair said anxiously, "Wang Kuejia, what should we do? This is Qinsong School's territory, you can't force your way in." With their arrogance and tyranny, if it was some other sect, no matter where they came from, they would fight them first. However, Qinsong School had dominated the north of Donghua for tens of thousands of years. They had fought countless demon cultivators from the North Nether continent and killed countless great demons. They were also shocked by its reputation. He did not dare to act rashly. Wang Kuejia was unconvinced. "I don't believe it. If this woman can enter the formation, why can't we?" The hairy demon revealed a look of disdain and said, "Brother Wang-san, the general used to say that you were more knowledgeable than me. Why is she so muddle-headed now? I think it's very likely that she's the guardian beast of one of the disciples of Qinsong School. That formation will not stop her." It was not easy for demon cultivators to cultivate. If one wanted to live forever, one had to look for bloodline and seek refuge with a great demon. If the other party liked them, they might give them some benefits. The third was to seek refuge with the feathered warriors of Xian sect and guard the cave for them. Although this path was like a forbidden land, if one was lucky and became familiar with the cultivators of Xian sect, they might be able to reincarnate into a human body in their next life. Entering Xian sect to cultivate, there were still many demon cultivators who flocked to it. When Wang Kuejia heard this, he immediately cursed and said angrily, "I told you long ago that this woman is a scourge, but you didn't listen. You actually gave that bastard to her. Now that we lost this bastard, how are we going to explain to the general when he asks about it?" He shouted loudly, and smelly saliva sprayed out and landed on the hairy demon cultivator's face. The hairy demon cultivator was not a good-tempered person. When he heard this, the hair on his cheeks stood up. He cried out in injustice and said, "Brother Wang-san, you really can't blame me for this. You have to know that General Han saw that this woman is smart and has an extraordinary background. He originally wanted to take her as a concubine and was trying to please her. I'm just a guard in the general's tent. It's fine if I can't please her, but how would I have the guts to stop her?" Wang Kuejia knew that he was telling the truth, and this was not the time to pass the buck. He waved his hand in annoyance and said, "Then let's not talk about this for now. That bastard must be killed. Otherwise, when we return, the general might pull out our tendons and pull out our bones, and skin us to make the drum that guards the mountain." When he thought of the hundreds of drums in front of General Han's tent, the hairy demon cultivator shuddered, and his expression turned a little ugly. He took a look at the clear nether heavenly lake, and fear appeared in his eyes. He shrunk his neck and hesitated. "But this place is not far from the mountain gate of Qinsong School, and there's a formation protecting it. I'm afraid that I'll die if I go there." Wang Kuejia stared at him and said, "Then what do you think we should do?" The hairy demon cultivator frowned and pulled the hair on his temples. He said in distress, "Let me think about it, think about it." These two demon cultivators were both clumsy, and they were not good at using their brains. After thinking about it, they still could not come up with a solution. In the end, Wang Kuejia roared angrily and said, "Why do you care so much? You stay here and keep watch. I'll go in and call the owner of this place out. If something bad happens to me, you go and report to the general and ask him to avenge me." He stomped his feet and rode a cloud, rushing into the formation. The hairy demon cultivator waited for several hours. Seeing that he did not come out even after a long time, he knew that he would not be lucky. He did not wait any longer, and flew northwest with a gust of wind. Once Luo Xiao entered the main hall, he staggered and almost fell to the ground. Luckily, he held onto a stone pillar and did not fall, but he still swayed a little. Sensing that someone had entered the residence, Shang Shang also walked out quickly. Seeing that it was Luo Xiao, she could not help but be overjoyed. However, looking at Luo Xiao's appearance, she thought that she was injured and was shocked. She hurriedly took 2 steps forward and supported her. She looked at her up and down and said, "Sister, you're finally back." "You?" Luo Xiao held her jade arm and shook her head lightly. "It's nothing. It's just that my vitality is slightly exhausted. I'll be fine after a few days of rest." After replying weakly, she forced herself to stand up straight and asked, "Where's Master?" Shang Shang said truthfully, "Master has been in seclusion for several years." Her beautiful eyes looked down and noticed the child beside Luo Xiao. She asked curiously, "Who is this child?" The child grabbed onto Luo Xiao's sleeve and looked at Shang Shang timidly. Luo Xiao patted his head and said proudly, "This is a good disciple that I snatched." Shang Shang was surprised. "Snatched?" Luo Xiao smiled. "Yes, I did." Shang Shang looked at the child and covered her mouth as she laughed. "This child's foundation is not ordinary. Where did you snatch him from, sister? I'll go snatch one too." Luo Xiao's beautiful eyes fluttered. "Have you heard of the Quanta tribe?" Shang Shang was originally a fish demon from the Water Nation, so she more or less knew about the various demon tribes. She nodded and said, "I've heard of it. It seems that the tribe is very valiant." In the North Darkstar continent near the Donghua continent, there were 3 major tribes. The Quanta tribe was one of them. They had tens of thousands of people and their strength was not to be underestimated. In recent years, the demonic calamity in the Donghua continent was about to happen, and the Wei nation was in chaos. The disciples of the various Taoist sects all returned to their sections. Even in Qinsong school, after hearing about Ji Suihan's death, Huxian rarely sent out disciples to kill demons and gain merit in order to avoid unnecessary losses. Even some small sects could not stand it and tried to discipline them a few times. However, they were surrounded by a few tribes with tens of thousands of troops, and all of them were annihilated. Seeing that no one would pay attention to them after they did this, these tribes became bolder. The demon king of the Quanta tribe, Quan He, led his tribe to migrate to the Donghua continent. They captured people and brought them back to be slaves. Moreover, they were tired of the wild food in the North Darkstar continent. With living people, they could sometimes change their tastes. But a few days ago, Quan He noticed that one of his favorite concubines was actually having an affair with a lowly slave and had even given birth to a child. It caused his rage to shoot to the heavens, and he secretly ordered his trusted subordinate, Drought Guang, to annihilate her. After Luo Xiao left the bright nether lake, she had been looking for a suitable disciple. Later, she came all the way to the North Darkstar continent. Because of her beauty and the fact that she was a relative of the old demon Luo Mengzi, Demon General Hongguang treated her like a distinguished guest and tried to please her. Later, he hinted that he wanted to take her as a concubine. Luo Xiao originally wanted to choose a few intelligent demons in the tribe as disciples. However, when she saw this child and saw that his talent was 1 in 100, which was rare in the world, she immediately had an idea. She managed to deceive the 2 guards under Hongguang's tent and stole the child. She escaped in the night and went straight back to the bright nether lake. At this moment, Zhang Yan was cultivating the wood elemental true light in the small pot mirror. Suddenly, he heard the mirror spirit reporting that Luo Xiao had returned, so he temporarily stopped cultivating and stepped out of the formation door. He walked to the main hall and laughed loudly. "Fellow Taoist Luo, I heard that you have taken in a good disciple?" When Luo Xiao saw Zhang Yan coming out, her beautiful eyes brightened. She quickly bowed and said happily, "Greetings, Master." She pulled the child over and said, "Ing Chen, come and greet Master." The child seemed to be afraid of strangers. He grabbed the corner of Luo Xiao's clothes tightly and hid behind her. He refused to come out no matter what. Luo Xiao also felt helpless. Zhang Yan looked at the child's face and nodded in praise. "His physique is really good. Fellow Taoist Luo has a good eye." He also heard what Luo Xiao said just now. This Quan Ingchen was at most 1 month old, but now he looked like he was clearly 5 or 6 years old. Not to mention that he was a mixed blood of human and demon, it was very strange that he grew so fast. It was hard to find a good talent. Zhang Yan had seen many talented people, among which Lu Yin's physique was the best. Although this child was not as good as his eldest disciple, he was not much worse. No wonder Luo Xiao desperately wanted to take him back. If he saw him, he would also be a little tempted. At this time, the mirror spirit walked out of the formation door. She took a few glances and came to the side of Zhang Yan. She whispered in his ear, "Master, there is a demon cultivator outside the door. He broke into the mountain guarding formation. How should we deal with him?" When Luo Xiao heard the words, she said apologetically, "Master, this should be the personal guard of the demon general Hongguang. This is all because of my carelessness, which led them to come here." Zhang Yan waved his hand, smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Luo doesn't have to blame yourself. My disciples are lacking people to practice with. This person came at the right time." To be continued. Chapter 405. Zhang Yan didn't care about Wang Kuejia, who broke into the formation. Even if the Quanta tribe was powerful and had tens of thousands of people, they couldn't kill their way into the Qinsong school. If they didn't want to live long enough, they could try. He ordered the mirror spirit to summon the Wang sisters and Tian Kun. After thinking for a while, he also summoned Yuan Yanhui and Wang Ziyuan. Under the protection of the mirror spirit, he sent them to the formation to practice with Wang Kuejia. The Wang sisters and Tian Kun had never fought with anyone since they started cultivating. Along the way, they didn't lack any magic treasures or cave residences. It could be said that their journey was smooth sailing. Compared to the hardships that Zhang Yan went through when he was cultivating, it was many times better. However, if they didn't practice hard, they wouldn't be successful. Zhang Yan wanted to use this demon cultivator to train them. Yuan Yanhui and Wang Ziyuan were a little different. Like Lu Yenyi, they often went out to kill demons and monsters to exchange for magic treasures and elixirs. They were very experienced in fighting. The difference was that Lu Yenyi had to do this because her master wasn't in the sect. She could only rely on herself. As for Yuan Yanhui and Wang Ziyuan, their master Zhu Bingwen wanted them to be independent so that they wouldn't be unable to stand in the sect after he reincarnated. Although this elder Zhu was good at manipulating people's minds, he was really good at teaching children. Of course, he didn't obtain this ability out of thin air. Before he took these two disciples, he had a few dozen disciples, and their bones had been buried somewhere long ago. He had expended a great deal of effort in order to teach these two disciples that he was proud of. Hearing Zhang Yan's summons, Wang and Yuan dared not delay for even a moment. They walked out of the cultivation area and entered the main hall with the Wang sisters and Tian Kun. They crossed the formation door and went to find Wang Kuejia as their opponent. As soon as they entered the formation, Yuan Yanhui saw Wang Kuejia barging around. From his appearance, it was obvious that he was a core formation stage demonic cultivator. Her beautiful eyes lit up and her pretty face was filled with excitement. If it wasn't for the protection of the formation, how could she fight against such a demonic cultivator? She immediately raised her sword and was about to charge forward, but at this moment, she felt her sleeve being pulled by someone. She subconsciously struggled, but she didn't manage to break free. She turned around and saw her senior brother. She couldn't help but anxiously stomp her foot and say, "Senior brother, why are you holding on to little sister?" Wang Ziyuan smiled and said, "Junior sister, you don't have to be impatient. Do you know why the Manor Lord sent us here?" Yuan Yan asked doubtfully, "You're not using this monster to practice?" Wang Ziyuan shook his head slightly and said, "Since we're just practicing, why do we have to go forward together? Isn't that against the Manor Lord's original intention? The Manor Master ordered us to come here with his 3 disciples. He wants us to take care of them from the side." Although Yuan Yanhui had a fiery temper, she was also very smart. After Wang Ziyuan's reminder, she immediately understood that the two of them weren't the main characters today. She couldn't help but feel discouraged. She curled her lips and restrained her sword chi a little. Wang Ziyuan comforted her, "Junior sister, don't be disappointed. With the Manor Lord here, if we can gain his trust, we won't have to worry about not having a chance to fight in the future." Yuan Yanhui snorted and turned her head away, saying, "I don't care." Wang Ziyuan saw that she was rubbing her toes on the ground and occasionally glancing in the direction of the demonic cultivator. How could he not see that she wasn't speaking the truth? He couldn't help but find it funny. But even when he was talking to Yuan Yanhui, his attention was always on the Wang sisters and Tian Kun. If there was any danger, he would immediately lend a helping hand. Zhang Yan knew the situation inside the formation like the back of his hand. When he saw Wang Ziyuan's action, He knew that Wang Ziyuan understood his intention. He nodded secretly and felt that Wang Ziyuan could be useful. With the protection of the mirror spirit and the help of Yuan and Wang Ziyuan, he didn't need to worry about the safety of the Wang sisters and Tian Kuan at all. So he withdrew his mind and talked to Luo Xiao, listening to her talk about what happened in the demon clan. However, after he heard this, he frowned and said in a deep voice, "Fellow cultivator Luo, are you saying that Quan He not only destroyed those sects, but also used the people he captured from the Donghua continent as rations?" Luo Xiao sighed and nodded, saying that Chuanha takes pleasure in eating people. When he is in a mood, he will eat hundreds of people at a meal. If something good is good, it must be good. The tribes under his command also have the same behavior. In the world, humans were the most intelligent of all creatures. Those demons who had not yet transformed deeply believed that eating humans could help them improve their cultivation. Whether it was useful or not, as long as there was blood food, they would eat it. But after tasting the taste, even if their cultivation increased in the future, they couldn't get rid of the bad taste of the tongue. They would feel greedy if they didn't eat humans for a day. In the past, there were cultivators from Shenmen who went out to kill these ferocious evildoers. But now, no one paid attention to them and they became even more unscrupulous. Luo Xiao was a relative of the old demon Luo Mingzi and had an extraordinary background. Ever since she transformed, her speech and behavior were no different from that of a human cultivator. She also couldn't stand such beastly behavior. But when she was in the Quanta tribe, her words didn't carry much weight and she couldn't stop them. Zhang Yan's eyes flickered slightly. He said firmly, "Such a vicious and evil demon tribe cannot be left alive. We must take the initiative to destroy it. Taoism friend Luo, I will end the karma between you and this demon tribe." Luo Xiao originally took this disciple over and there would be a time when this matter would be settled. Of course, at that time, maybe Luo Xiao would take action, or maybe her disciple would do it herself. She had never thought of letting someone else do it. However, after hearing Zhang Yan's resolute and decisive words, she stood up and bowed gracefully, saying, "I will listen to Master's decision on this matter." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Taoism friend Luo, you have been busy for a long time. Go and rest first." Luo Xiao bowed again and took her leave. Zhang Yan pondered for a while, then stepped open the formation door and left the cave abode. He rode the clouds towards the 10 Peaks mountain. Not long after, he arrived at the top of the 10 Peaks mountain. He called out at the entrance of the cave abode and a sturdy servant girl invited him in. Huoxian was holding a book in his hand and reading it attentively. Seeing him come in, he invited him to sit and said with a smile, "I haven't seen junior brother Zhang for a long time. I wonder what you have come to teach me today?" He guessed in his heart that Zhang Yan had come for the sake of the disciple that was holding down the fort in that small sect. This wasn't strange at all because everyone knew the benefits of it, and there had been many people that had come looking for him earlier in hopes of obtaining a share of the spoils. Unexpectedly, after sitting down, Zhang Yan didn't talk about this matter. He couldn't help but be surprised. When he heard that the demon tribe from the North Underworld continent ate living people and even destroyed a few sects, Huoxian's eyes suddenly changed. He was a person who was extremely good at seizing opportunities. He immediately saw that there was something to be done. After more than 2 years of planning, the matter of supporting the small sects had already made some headway. However, although those sects had expressed their intention to get close to them, they had never truly agreed. They were still somewhat hesitant. It was obvious that they wanted to obtain some benefits first before putting in any effort. How could Huoxian allow this opening? If one clan gave benefits, then all the other clans would have to do the same. Even though the Yutsang sect was a large sect of Shenmen, it did not have many cultivation items for free. Even if he was the leader of the top 10 disciples, it was impossible for him to squander them and use them as a favor. He gradually lost his patience with this. Previously, he had used gentle methods and spoke kindly to the various sections. He had never spoken harshly. But now it seemed that he was too polite to this group of people before. He had to beat them up. To motivate these small sects, he had to use both hard and soft methods. Blindly expressing goodwill would be useless. Now that the disciples of the Devil clan were becoming more and more rampant in the Donghua continent, he had originally planned to choose a strong enough target to intimidate the small sects that were still uncertain. But now that the other 9 major sects were holding back, he was also hesitating whether the Qinsong school should be the first to step out. But if he started with the demon tribe, he wouldn't have to worry about this. He wouldn't have to immediately go against the Devil clan, and he would have a suitable excuse. Zhang Yan's suggestion was exactly what he wanted. In the blink of an eye, numerous thoughts flashed through Huoxian's mind. But at this moment he suddenly came to an understanding. Obviously, Zhang Yan had noticed the reason behind this, so he seized the opportunity to give him a countermeasure. When he thought of this, he sighed in his heart. Zhang Yan had given him such an idea, and it could be considered that he had completely repaid the favor of giving him the Purple Abundance astral sand. Next time, it would be slightly difficult for him to ask Zhang Yan to help him. He shook his head, calmed his thoughts, and said in a low voice, "Junior brother is right. These few demon tribes dared to attack and kill the disciples of the Xianmen sect. Our Qinsong school, as a major sect of the Xianmen sect, cannot ignore such evildoers. We must eliminate them." After saying this, he looked at Zhang Yan and said, "But how do we eliminate these 3 demon tribes? Junior brother, do you have any ideas?" In the past 10,000 years, the Qinsong school had fought against the demon cultivators of the Northern Darkness continent many times. These 3 demon tribes were naturally not in Huoxian's eyes. He only needed to send a few capable disciples to eliminate them. But if Zhang Yan had other plans and he unintentionally disturbed them, then it would not be good. Therefore, he had to ask in advance. Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Junior brother, I don't have any ideas. If it is possible, we can bring the disciples of the small sects on this trip. It will be good to let them see the methods of the Qinsong school." Huoxian took a deep look at Zhang Yan and thought to himself, "Junior brother Zhang must be doing this for the sake of his own reputation. Looks like his ambition isn't small. However, with junior brother Zhang's lifespan and natural talent, it probably won't take him 100 years to reach my current position." His goal was the Temple Lord of the Daylight Temple. To him, the position of the first seat of the top 10 disciples was only a necessary path to achieve his goal. He did not place much importance on it. Instead, he somewhat approved of the drive that Zhang Yan had displayed. He thought that he had seen through Zhang Yan's intentions. But Zhang Yan had solved a problem for him. Now that he was in a good mood, he did not have the heart to stop him. He nodded and said, "Since this is junior brother's suggestion, you will be in charge of it. I will arrange the people. What do you think?" But Zhang Yan's answer once again exceeded Huoxian's expectations. He only heard Zhang Yan say indifferently, "This time, there are 3 demon tribes that came from the Northern Darkness continent. Leave the Quanta tribe to me. As for the other 2 tribes, I will not overstep my authority." Chapter 406. Zhang Yan and Huoxian discussed for a while and decided to leave in 3 days. As for the exact number of people, he wouldn't interfere. He said goodbye to the 10 Peaks mountain cave and returned to the clear darkness heavenly lake. After entering the main hall, he turned the small pot mirror. Light and shadow rippled, and the scene within the formation appeared. Seeing that the Wang sisters and Tian Kuan were still fighting against the demonic cultivator Wang Kuejia, and because they were no longer in a life-threatening situation, with Wang Ziyuan and Yuan Yanhui taking care of them from time to time, the 3 disciples were initially very restrained, but now they were able to let go of their hands and feet, and they were even able to cooperate with each other. Zhang Yan thought, "The difference in cultivation between my 3 disciples and this beast cultivator is too big. It seems like they can only practice like this for now. In the future, when their cultivation increases, they can go out to train like Yan Yi." Thinking up to there, he glanced at Wang and Yuan Yanhui, and his expression changed slightly. The battle within the array lasted for an entire day. Seeing that his 3 disciples were extremely tired, Zhang Yan ordered the mirror spirit to send them out of the array and back into the cave. He then called Wang and Yuan Yanhui over. As soon as the 2 of them arrived at the hall, they greeted Zhang Yan and stood there with folded hands. Zhang Yan looked down and said in a low voice, Now that the two of you have cultivated to the second level of the mystic light realm, let me ask you. Do you want to go out and search for herbs and try your luck? Or do you want to stay in the cave and form the pills? Hearing this, Yuan Yanhui didn't say anything and only looked at Wang Ziyuan. She trusted this senior brother very much, no matter what decision he made. No matter what decision he made, she would follow his lead. Logically speaking, the master and disciple lineage of the Yuzhong sect should have gone out to look for herbs, but Wang Ziyuan could tell from Zhang Yan's words that there was another option. They could condense the pill in this cave abode, and the manor lord would provide the external herbs they needed. Now, all he had to do was say the word, and the pill would be within his reach. This would save him a lot of effort. This was how shrewd Wang Ziyuan was. He couldn't help but be tempted. However, he was a calm and wise person after all. He felt that if they obtained the external medicine now, it would seem that they had taken less detours and gained a lot of advantages, but in reality, it was very likely that it would cause Zhang Yan to think that the two of them did not have a firm heart to cultivate. Perhaps he would not give up on them, but in the future, he would definitely not value them. This was losing the big picture for the small. On the other hand, if he gave up on the shortcut and chose to search for medicine, although it would be more twists and turns, he would be able to obtain more benefits in the long run. He didn't think for long before he came to a decision. Suppressing the temptation in his heart, he cupped his hands and said, "Manor head, if it's possible, please let us go out to search for medicine." Zhang Yan's eyes were calm as he said, "Have you made up your mind?" He had missed the opportunity. Then there won't be any more. Wang Ziyuan bowed and said, "I have decided." Since he had already made up his mind, whether it was right or wrong, he would not change it. Zhang Yan said expressionlessly, "If that's the case, I will order Zhang Jing to give the two of you a talisman later. You can go back to your cultivation place and go out to search for medicine at any time." He waved his sleeve. A gust of wind blew in the main hall, and in an instant, the two of them were pushed out of the main hall. When the two of them came back to their senses, they were already outside the main hall. Yuan Yanhui's brows furrowed in worry as she asked, "Senior brother, is the manor head blaming us?" Wang Ziyuan smiled and said confidently, "Junior martial sister, it's the opposite. We have chosen the right path. If the palace lord blames us, why would he give us the talisman?" Yuan Yanhui tilted her head and thought about it. She felt that it was reasonable and said happily, "That's true." Since Wang Ziyuan entered the manor, although he looked relaxed on the surface, he was living under someone else's roof after all. His heart had been trembling as if he was walking on thin ice, for fear of doing something wrong. But now he calmed down a little. He let out a long breath and said in a relaxed tone, "Junior martial sister, go back and pack up. We will go out to search for medicine." Yuan Yanhui seemed to be infected by his mood. She smiled charmingly and said, "Yes, senior martial brother." After Zhang Yan dismissed the two of them, he shouted and said, "Zhang Jing, bring me the monster cultivator." The mirror spirit took the order and activated the mountain guarding formation to move a little. Then, Wang Kuejia was sent out and thrown into the main hall. Wang Kuejia was fighting with several juniors. Every time he attacked, he was protected by the formation. He was full of anger and had nowhere to vent it. Suddenly, the scene in front of him changed. His head was heavy and his feet were light. He fell to the ground. When he crawled up, he raised his head and saw Zhang Yan sitting in the middle of the hall. He immediately knew that Zhang Yan was the master of the hall. He shouted loudly and relying on his thick skin and thick flesh, he rushed forward and threw a punch towards Zhang Yan's face. Immediately the hall was filled with a whistling sound and a fierce gust of wind surged, pressing down on Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan sneered. He raised his hand and grabbed Wang Kuejia's fist. With a little force, he flipped Wang Kuejia over. Wang Kuejia was dizzy from the fall, but he didn't want to admit defeat. He howled at the sky and twisted his body, stirring up a fishy smell on the ground. In the swirling black wind, an ironback blue wolf with erect ears and a long snout, white fur and brown eyes appeared. There was a hint of cruelty in its fierce eyes. It paused with its 4 claws, stepped on the smoke, and pounced again. But this time, before it could even get close, Zhang Yan just flicked his finger, and a dozen drops of dark heavy water shot out like pearls, and they struck Wang Kuejia's body in succession, causing numerous muffled bangs to resound out. Even though Wang Kuejia cultivated in the path of strength and had a sturdy body, he was unable to endure such an impact. Not only did bloody holes appear all over his body, even his iron bones were on the verge of breaking. This round of attacks from Zhang Yan had forced him to retreat more than 10 feet away. Just now, Wang Kuejia stopped. He shook his body, and his wounds instantly closed. He stared at Zhang Yan. Only then did he realize that this person in front of him was not someone to be trifled with. He didn't give up. He rolled on the ground and stood up again. With a shake of his hand, a pair of copper whips appeared out of nowhere. He held them in his left and right hands. With a laugh, his body suddenly grew to 30 feet tall, like a giant. He only took one step forward and was in front of Zhang Yan. He raised the copper whips high and smashed them down. Zhang Yan turned a blind eye to the incoming force. His expression didn't change. He cast a spell, and a big yellow hand rose from the top of his head. It grabbed Wang Kuejia's body and picked him up and threw him dozens of feet away. Wang Kuejia fell on his back and felt numb all over. Wang Kuejia's chest heaved up and down. He wailed and threw away the 2 copper whips. He gave up and said, "I'm no match for a Taoist like you. If you want to kill me, do it." Zhang Yan laughed and shook his head. He said, "I heard that you're the personal guard of the monster king Quan He of the Quanta tribe. I thought you were someone special, but now it seems that you're nothing special. I'm really disappointed." Wang Kuejia hated it when people looked down on his tribe. Hearing this, he suddenly became angry and shouted, "Bullshit! Bullshit! I'm the personal guard of General Han Guang, who is under the command of the king. How can I be compared to the king?" Zhang Yan said lightly, "I heard from Lady Luo that the king you mentioned is only at the level of turning Dan, but I can't see any difference between him and you." Hearing this, Wang Kuejia was even more angry. He said, "You're talking nonsense. My king is a descendant of the heavenly wolf. He has the bloodline of a big monster. How can a little monster like me compare to him?" He talked non-stop, and the more he talked, the more excited he became. Zhang Yan stabbed him from time to time. Unknowingly, he revealed part of the Quanta tribe's secrets. Zhang Yan listened for a while and finally nodded with a smile. He said, "I see. I was worried that I didn't know how to deal with the Quanta tribe. Thank you for telling me the details." Wang Kuejia was stunned. Then he realized that he was tricked. He scolded, "You're not a good person. How dare you trick me?" Zhang Yan already knew what he wanted to know. Wang Kuejia was no longer useful in front of him. He didn't want to argue with this kind of monster. He waved his hand and ordered the mirror spirit to trap him in the array again. He knew from Luo Shao that in the Quanta tribe, the highest level of cultivation was only the level of turning Dan. But among the monster cultivators, even if they were in the same level, their cultivation would be different because of their cultivation and bloodline. It could even be said that the difference was like heaven and earth. Those ordinary little monsters could only bully mortals with their monster bodies. They usually couldn't compete with the disciples of the Xianmen sect. Only those who made great contributions or those who were talented could get the blood and bones of the big monster or the tribe leader to get rid of the turbidity, improve their cultivation, and even reverse the body of the big monster. Looking at the cultivation of a monster cultivator, one only needed to look at his background to know his cultivation. Those like Luo Shao who chose the path of Qi were, after all, the minority among the monster cultivators. Zhang Yan originally planned to take a few disciples to watch the battle. But after listening to Wang Kuejia, he knew that Quan He was a descendant of the Heavenly Wolf tribe. There were also a few strong people in the tribe who were not easy to deal with. After thinking for a while, he felt that he could come and go freely. If there was any danger, he could escape in time. After making up his mind, he returned to the small pot mirror and meditated. 3 days later, Zhang Yan woke up from his meditation. He waved his sleeves and turned into a light smoke. He went out of the cave and came to the Heaven Lake. After Shang Chang's arrangement, there were many elegant pavilions and waterside pavilions. He came to a small pavilion near the lake and stood with his hands behind his back. At this moment, the sky was high and the sun was bright. The clear blue water was sparkling. The scenery was very pleasant. It made people want to go fishing. According to the agreement, Huoxian would send disciples to meet with him today. They would go to kill the monster tribe together. Just as he was thinking about who Huoxian would send, he suddenly felt something and couldn't help but look up. In midair, there was a beautiful and celestial woman walking over from the clouds with light steps. Every step she took caused a cloud of mist to form beneath her feet, and it was clear and smooth like jade, extremely elegant and pure. She wore a lotus-colored skirt. Her waist was slender and there was a butterfly ornament on her hair. The ornaments clashed and made a sweet sound. Before she arrived, there was an elegant fragrance. Zhang Yan was a little surprised. He thought that the person who would go with him would be Fang Zhenlu. He didn't expect it to be this woman. He took a step forward and said, "So it's senior sister Han. Sorry for not going out to meet you." Han Sui landed on the ground and curtsied. He said quietly, "Junior brother Zhang, I am well. Senior brother Huo ordered me to go with you to eliminate the evildoers." Chapter 407. When Zhang Yan saw Han Sui arrive, he invited her to sit in the pavilion. He clapped his hands, and ripples appeared in the heavenly pond. A bell-like laugh rang out, and a beautiful woman stepped out of the water, carrying a lotus leaf that was moist from the rain. She gracefully came over and placed 2 clam cups on the stone table in the pavilion. One of the cups was clear dew. Han Sui's expression was tranquil, and she said, "Junior brother Zhang, I don't usually touch a drop of wine." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Senior sister, you misunderstand. This is the jade dew condensed from the shell of my heavenly pond. It's sweet and mellow, not water wine." He picked up a cup, raised his hand, and made a gesture of respect and said, "Please." Han Sui glanced at him, stretched out her slender fingers, and picked up the clam cup. She covered her face with her sleeves, and without moving her upper body, she drank the jade dew. Zhang Yan also picked up the clam cup and drank it in one gulp. After Han Sui drank it, she suddenly felt a cool and refreshing feeling spread through her body. Her body became light, and her mind became clear. She praised and said, "Not bad." She had a cold personality, and normally she cultivated in her cave. Aside from the cultivators of her clan, she rarely interacted with people of the same sect. According to her intentions, although she was going to sweep the demon department with Zhang Yan, it would be best if they didn't meet. But before she left, Huoxian came to find her and asked her to give an item to Zhang Yan as a sign of his solemnity. Facing the 10th disciple's seat, she couldn't refuse, so she could only agree, and personally came to see Zhang Yan. But she wasn't good at beating around the bush, and after a moment of silence, she said, "Junior brother Zhang, you're usually alone outside, and I'm afraid you're used to riding the wind and traversing the clouds. But now you're one of the 10 disciples of my Qinsong school. But this time, we're sweeping the demon department to intimidate the small sects, and if you don't have a ride, I'm afraid it's inappropriate. Senior brother Huo ordered me to come first and deliver this flying starry palace that Bao Yang courtyard built for you." She flicked a jade bracelet lightly, and a speck of starlight flew out and landed above the heaven lake. In the blink of an eye, it transformed into a small city that was 2,500 feet in length and width. It had jade steps and copper pillars, and was surrounded by clouds. The 4 corners of the flying palace were watchtowers. The main hall in the middle of the palace was majestic and magnificent. Flowers and trees were planted all around the hall, and there were even a few clear and long crane cries coming from inside. This time, the Qinsong school dispatched cultivators to kill the cultivators of the demon division. It wasn't just Zhang Yan and Han Sui. Aside from the disciples in the sect, there were also disciples from smaller sections. They were the face of Qinsong school, so they couldn't be too shabby. Zhang Yan glanced at it and did not decline. He cupped his hands and said, "Then it would be impolite for me to refuse." Han Sui completed Huoxian's task and was about to leave. He asked, "When will junior brother depart?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Senior sister Rushi is fine. I'll make some arrangements and then we'll set off." Han Sui did not say anything else. She stood up and bent her knees. She stepped on a cloud of smoke and flew into the sky. At this moment, a magnificent flying palace with colorful flowers hanging on it floated out of the clouds. She waved her sleeves. She waved her sleeves and disappeared. Zhang Yan noticed that there were many ships following the flying palace. They were densely packed, and there were probably more than 100 of them. They were all emitting light and smoke, which spread for more than 100 miles. Other than that, there were also many feathered knights riding on cranes and riding beasts. He roughly estimated that there were about 500 to 600 disciples in the sect, and that didn't include the cultivators from the smaller sections. Looking at the formation, Huoxian took this matter very seriously. It was the first time he had sent disciples out on an expedition. It was possible that there were elders with higher statuses than him and Han Sui. Zhang Yan sat for a while longer and drank a few more cups of rain and dew. Then he stood up and soared into the sky, heading for his flying palace. After he got on the flying palace, he went straight to the main hall. He crossed the 3 jade bridges in front of the door and entered the hall. He sat in the hall and saw that there were incense burners and bronze cranes. There were cups with pearls on the walls. It was not much different from his cave abode. He couldn't help but sigh. When he went on an expedition to the 3 pools, he followed Fan Chongqing there and sat in a flying palace like this. He didn't expect that after so many years, he would also have one. However, Fan Chongqing's flying palace was built by the Spiritual Mechanism Institute. Although the shape was similar, it was actually very crude. As for his, it was specially built by the Bao Yang Institute for the top 10 disciples. Only the top 10 disciples could sit on it. It was unknown how much more majestic it was than the one Fan Chongqing sat on. After the sex competition, the Bao Yang Institute started building this item. However, the institute was controlled by the aristocratic families. If Zhang Yan wanted to smoothly take this item, he would have to go through some trouble. But this time, under pressure from Huoxian, he reluctantly took it out. With this item in hand, the demon division was in an invincible position. They were given talismans to guard the river and the gate. Usually, they enjoyed the offerings of the people on the shore. Zhang Yan was used to being alone, so he did not think of them just now. So he nodded and said in a low voice, "Call him in." Not long after, a black-faced fish demon with a worried face entered the hall under the guidance of Shang Chong. When he saw Zhang Yan, he knelt on the ground and said in a trembling voice, "Little demon, Ming Shi, greets the Qinsong schoolmaster." Zhang Yan took a look and said, "You are the river guardian of this place?" Although Zhang Yan's voice was light, in the eyes of the black-faced fish monster, there was a great majesty hidden in it. He didn't even dare to breathe loudly. He kowtowed and said respectfully, "Yes, I am." Although he was appointed by the Xianmen, the Qinsong school dominated the north of Donghua. In reality, he only listened to the orders of the Qinsong school. He was also afraid that the Taoists from the Qinsong school would know that Zhang Yan's identity was not simple just by looking at the flying palace, so he was even more careful. Zhang Yan said again, "Let me ask you, where are the demon tribes that were here a few days ago?" The black-faced fish demon said with a trembling voice, reporting to Exalted Master. Ever since the 3 demon tribes entered the Donghua continent, they have already broken through a few border cities of the Wei Kingdom. 10 days ago, they probably ran out of food, so they crossed the river and headed towards the direction of the Yong continent of the Wei Kingdom. I was unable to stop them. Please punish me. As he finished, he kowtowed heavily on the ground again. His forehead was bleeding. Although the black-faced fish demon had thousands of marine animals under his command, he was good at dealing with a few wandering ghosts. However, this time, the 3 demon tribes had joined forces to go south to the Donghua continent. There were no less than 100,000 of them crossing the river. They did not dare to stop them. They were so scared that they abandoned their residences. They were extremely afraid that Zhang Yan would kill them. Zhang Yan laughed coldly and said, "These demons are really bold." The reason why he did not think too much about crossing the river was that out of the tens of thousands of demon tribes, only about 100 of them knew how to fly. It was fine on the north bank. If they saw something was wrong, they could leave at any time. However, if they crossed the river once they were targeted by the Xianmen, They would all stay on the south bank. The risk was too great. How could the demons of the three tribes not know about this? Therefore, for the past few months, the demons of the three tribes had been moving along the river and did not cross it. However, along the way they ate and drank like locusts. The villages and cities were all destroyed. There was no trace of people, birds and beasts. There was no food to be found north of the river. However, they had tasted the sweetness. If they returned to the North Darkland continent, they would not be willing. But staying here would only mean starvation. Thinking about how no cultivators from the Xian men came to stop them in the past few months, they gathered their courage and crossed the river. The black-faced fish demon heard Zhang Yan's tone. It seemed that he had no intention of pursuing the matter. He quickly said, "Master, you will definitely be able to turn the situation around this time. You can turn the tides with a flip of your hand. You can turn the tides with a flip of your hand. You can kill them all." Because this he show was in charge of a territory, he often went to the nearby provinces and counties to meet with the gentry and county officials. He learned a lot of bootlicking skills, but his words were incoherent and nondescript, making all the maids in the hall cover their mouths and chuckle. Zhang Yan frowned and ignored him. He only said, "Go to the flying palace behind me and report the situation." The black-faced fish demon did not dare disobey. He said a few more words that he thought were pretty, and then excitedly left the flying palace to see Han Sui. Zhang Yan closed his eyes to rest. Not long after, he saw a letter flying over. It was written by Han Sui himself. On it were 6 words, "Killed. Follow the master's orders." After he looked at it, he activated the talisman. The flying palace shook and flew in the direction of the Wei Kingdom's Yongzhou. Chapter 408. There weren't many people on the south bank of the Shanghe River. Most of the trees were tall and ancient. There were only a few mountain paths leading to Wei. However, the army of over 100,000 demons charged forward, regardless of whether there was a path or not. When they encountered a mountain, they opened a mountain, and when they encountered water, they filled up a river. They were like a torrent, and everywhere they passed seemed to have been plowed. Groups of beasts fled, birds flew in panic, and the demonic chi that shot into the sky could be seen from over 50 kilometers away. Chuizhou was the largest city in the northwest of Wei. Governor Yang Pai was a capable official. At this moment, the city was filled with soldiers. Crossbows, poison water, and rolling stones were all prepared. Other than that, there were some Taoists working on the city wall. They used wooden swords to carry the talisman and chanted some incantation. They were summoned by the nearby Taoist palaces to help defend the city. A few days ago, there was news that Yongzhou city had turned into a ghost town. The 70,000 people in the city had been devoured by the demons. Therefore, the city had to be on high alert. Beside Governor Yang stood an elegant young Taoist dressed in a coarse blue robe. He took a few glances and said worriedly, "Sir Yang, these Taoist friends are good at drawing talismans to catch ghosts and praying to cure illnesses. They're good, but they're still not enough to deal with those demons." Governor Yang thought highly of this Taoist. He smiled bitterly, "Taoist Jiang, how could I not know that? But it's better than nothing. Otherwise, before the demons attack, the entire city will be wiped out. They can run, but I can't. The people in the city can't either." Taoist Jiang sighed, "What a pity, I's magic power is weak. If my master was here, he wouldn't let these demons run wild." Governor Yang knew this was Taoist Jiang's ability. Not to mention anything else, just the fact that he was able to fly in the sky without the help of any magic tools was enough to prove that he was the only Taoist he had ever seen. Hearing him mention his master, Governor Yang couldn't help but ask, "Which immortal is your master? Can you ask him to come and save the people?" Taoist Jiang's expression was sad. He shook his head slowly. Governor Yang couldn't help but be disappointed. To him, Taoist Jiang's cultivation was unimaginable. Wouldn't his master's magic power be unbelievably high? But such a celestial being couldn't save the people. He couldn't help but say, "It's hard to find the immortals, but how can the common people be blamed for this disaster?" Taoist Jiang had no other choice. Back then his teacher had only passed on a cultivation technique to him. Later, by chance, he had stumbled upon the abode of a cultivator who had passed away in meditation deep in the mountains. Just now, he was able to condense the mystic light. However, he did not know which sect his master was from, nor did he know where he was right now. He only remembered that elegant and majestic figure back then. How was he supposed to answer this? When an advisor saw the governor in such a state, he came up and bowed. "Don't be anxious, sir. This lowly one has a solution. It can stop demons." Governor Yang raised his head in surprise. His expression became somewhat more spirited as he anxiously said, "Since you have an idea, why don't you tell me quickly?" The advisor pointed to the surging river 5 miles outside the city and said, "Sir, please look." This was the Long River, the water surging violently, flowing endlessly. This type of heaven and earth whaley was 10 times greater than that of demons. "Send people to dig it up." Before he finished, Yang Taisho's expression changed abruptly. He shouted, "Shut up." Since the advisor had come up with this idea, he had already thrown caution to the wind. He was actually not afraid in the slightest. He knelt down with a plop and said, "Sir, it's true that the common people's homes can't be protected, but we can definitely stop them from going south. Sir, even if we sacrifice our prefecture, we can still save the people of the world." How could Yang Taisho not know that this method was feasible? However, once the Long River was opened, everything within 1,000 miles would become a country of water. It was unknown how many people would die in this flood. Not only that, he would also have to bear this eternal infamy. Even if he went underground, he probably wouldn't be able to rest in peace. No matter how hard the advisor tried to persuade him, he wouldn't listen. He even ordered people to drag him away and use cloth to cover his mouth. At this moment, 50 miles outside of Weizhou City, Monster King Quan, he stood on a mound. More than 10 demons surrounded him. Behind him were the demons of Quanta tribe that covered the mountains and plains. He was dressed in a golden robe and looked mighty and strong. His eyebrows were like swords and his eyes were like stars. There was no demonic aura on his face. He looked at the faintly visible Long River and said, "I heard that this Weizhou city is the largest city in the northwestern region. It has a population of 200,000. It's a meathead indeed. However, it's not easy to cross the river. General Han, bring your personal guards and occupy this city for me. Snatch the meat and share it with your men." General Han was 15 feet tall. He had a rough face and protruding teeth. He was a cultivator of strength path and could change his body size. However, he especially liked to be this majestic. Upon hearing this, he said in a low voice, "Your Majesty, don't worry. This time, without the 2 tribes fighting over it, the people in this city will definitely be our meal." Although the demons of the 3 tribes combined were powerful, it was still not enough. Therefore, after they left the mountain, they split up. Since Quanta tribe was the strongest, Weizhou City became the meat next to their mouth. General Han casually bowed to Quanta tribe and waved his hand. He brought more than 10 personal guards who could fly, stirred up a fierce black wind and flew towards Weizhou City. Quanta tribe looked at him and suddenly felt a little uneasy. Even though he led the crowd all the way here and the journey was extremely smooth and didn't encounter any obstruction, but crossing the river and going deep into the country of Wei wasn't what he wanted. However, he was the new tribe leader, so if he wanted to convince the crowd, he could only obey the will of the few demon generals in the tribe. However, after crossing the river, if there were Xian men who came to kill the demons, it would be difficult for him to escape unscathed. Just as he was feeling annoyed, the personal guard beside him suddenly pointed to the sky and said, "Your Majesty, what's that?" Quanta tribe looked up and his pupils shrank. He said, "The flying palace of Starry Pivot?" His heart couldn't help but sink. What he was afraid of had really happened. Among the Xian men in the north of Donghua, only Qinsong School could have a flying palace. To be able to use a flying palace as a mount, one had to be at least a core formation cultivator. However, what shocked him was yet to come. In the blink of an eye, another flying palace leaped out of the clouds. Behind it, there seemed to be countless flying boats and celestial birds. Seeing such a scene, the demons below were also a little flustered. They said, "Your Majesty, it's the disciples of Xianmen. What should we do?" Quanta Tribe said sternly, "What are you panicking for? Look at that flying palace. There are only 2 core formation cultivators. Those behind are just there to make up the numbers. We have more than 40,000 people. Even if we double the number, what are we afraid of?" When the demons heard this, they felt that it made sense and calmed down a little. Quanta Tribe clenched his fists. Only he knew that once Qinsong School made a move, how could they not be fully prepared? This time, they had come with a thunderous attack. Taking a step back, even if he could repel all the enemies in front of him, it would be impossible for them to return to the north bank safely. Meanwhile, in the flying palace, Zhang Yan waved his sleeves. Smoke rose up from the jade steps in front of the palace, revealing the scene below. He stood up and looked down. The demons were like ants, and the ground was like a thick carpet. Tens of thousands of demons couldn't hide their movements at all. In less than 2 hours, they had caught up. He thought about it for a moment. Just now, the tall demon general was heading in the direction of Weizhou. Although there were only a dozen or so demon cultivators, it wouldn't be difficult for them to wipe out an entire city. Therefore, he couldn't just sit back and watch. He had to kill them first. As for here, with Han Sui there, he didn't have to worry about them escaping. Therefore, he ignored the demons below. He activated the flying palace and flew over them, heading in the direction of Weizhou. General Han flew with his guards. In less than a moment he was in the sky above Weizhou City. The city walls were tall and majestic, but in his eyes, they were like paper. He laughed viciously and stopped using his flying technique. He didn't even take out a weapon. He just dropped down from the sky. The people on the city wall were shocked to see a giant demon descending from the sky. Before he even landed, the soldiers on the city wall had already scattered. Taoist Jiang saw that things weren't going well. He grabbed Yang Taisho, released his mystic light, and soared into the sky to avoid the attack. There was a loud rumble, and dust flew everywhere. Bricks and stones were sent flying. The city wall collapsed under General Han's stomp. Some of the officials and the old and weak soldiers who didn't have time to escape died on the spot. General Han saw the panicked people around him. He laughed and opened his mouth, revealing a bloody mouth. He took a deep breath, and the soldiers who ran away were swept back into his mouth by a gust of wind. He chewed a few times, and the sound of bones cracking and flesh rotting could be heard. After a moment, blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Seeing him eat people alive, some of the braver soldiers were so frightened that they threw away their weapons and fled in all directions. Yang Taisho's eyes turned red. He cried out, "Taoist Jiang, don't worry about me. Go and stop this demon." His cry immediately attracted General Han's attention. He turned around and saw the 2 of them being carried in the air by the mystic light. He chuckled and punched upward. Taoist Jiang was shocked. He knew he was no match for this demon, but just as he was about to dodge, he found that his body was being pulled by a whirlpool. He couldn't dodge at all. At this critical moment, he formed a spell and a green light appeared on his body. He shook his body and slipped away. General Han let out a cry of surprise. He didn't expect his punch to miss. Just as he was about to attack again, he suddenly saw a cold light flying toward him. That coldness caused all the hair on his body to stand on end. In a hurry, he raised his arm to block in front of him. With a kacha, this ray of light actually chopped off one of his wrists. General Han was shocked and angry. He said, "Who attacked your general? You're just a demon. How dare you call yourself a general?" As the voice sounded in the air, the clouds parted and a handsome Taoist walked over from the sky. His sleeves fluttered in the wind, and his body was surrounded by smoke. General Han couldn't help but take a few steps back. This Taoist actually gave him a lot of pressure. He roared angrily and circulated his cultivation technique. His wrist grew out once again. Then he spread out his hands and threw out a coiled long saber. He stomped his feet and leaped into the air. With another loud shout, he raised his arms and slashed down with the saber. Zhang Yan sneered and pointed with his finger. A bolt of purple lightning flew out. In an instant, the light illuminated the sky and landed on General Han's body. A thunderous boom resounded in the sky. The entire city seemed to be shaking. Everyone present lost their balance and fell to the ground. When they looked at General Han again, not even his bones were left. He had turned into ashes. Chapter 409. General Han was in too much of a hurry. He rode the wind and clouds ahead of them, so his guards were left behind. When they arrived, they just happened to see that Zhang Yan had used a purple firmament thunderbolt to strike him to death, and his flesh and bones had turned into ashes. This scene made them abnormally horrified. After letting out a shout, they desperately flew back. Zhang Yan stood in the air with his hands clasped behind his back. He knew that Han Suyi and his men had surrounded them. These evildoers couldn't escape, so he didn't chase them. The people in the city saw him descend from the sky. With a wave of his hand, he summoned lightning and swept away the evildoers. They thought that he was a real immortal descending from the heavens. They all knelt down and worshipped him. They called out, "Immortal," and kept kowtowing. Yang Taisho was also very excited. He shouted, "The heavens have not destroyed our Chuizhou. With the help of such an immortal, the people of Chuizhou will be safe. Taoist Jiang, please bring me forward. I want to meet this immortal." At this moment, Jiang Jing seemed to be stunned when he saw Zhang Yan. Governor Yang called out to him several times before he regained his senses. He suddenly circulated his profound light and arrived in front of Zhang Yan. He suddenly knelt down on the cloud and choked with sobs. "Little brother Jiang Zheng is so fortunate to be able to see Master's immortal face again today." After saying that, he prostrated himself and respectfully kowtowed 3 times. Zhang Yan looked at him and asked, "You are the young man from that day?" Jiang Zheng was excited to see that his master still remembered him. He bowed again and said, "Yes, I am." Zhang Yan looked at him again and nodded. He sighed, "You didn't have anyone to guide you, but you still managed to cultivate to this level. That is very rare." That day when the long river burst its dike, Jiang Zheng and his fellow villagers were trapped on a hill. That day, Zhang Yan happened to pass by, so he conveniently rescued Jiang Zheng and his dozen or so villagers. Because he saw that Jiang Zheng's bone structure was acceptable, and he also had some intelligence, Zhang Yan specially gave him a talisman. It was this talisman that allowed Jiang Zheng to peek into the path of cultivation. Different from the cultivation methods of mortals, Zhang Yan not only gave him a cultivation method, but he also told him where to get the jade elixir essence pool for opening meridians. It was just one more piece of advice. After he condensed his essence, he was able to open his meridians in a declining family with the surname Han. Later, when he traveled the world, he found a cave abode of a predecessor and was able to cultivate to the mystic light realm. Yang Taisho was shocked. So this Taoist was Taoist Zhang's teacher. He thought that this Taoist must have predicted that his disciple was in trouble and came to help. He could not help but exclaim in his heart that he was extremely fortunate. He carefully sized up Zhang Yan. Although this immortal looked to be in his 20s, he understood that one could not judge the age of a person who could fly in the sky and summon lightning based on his appearance. This Taoist young, but he Taoist was a young. He tidied up his attire and bowed solemnly. "Thank you, immortal elder, for protecting us and saving the lives of the people in the city. How should I address you, immortal elder?" Zhang Yan smiled. Instead of replying, he asked, "Are you the governor of this place?" Yang Taisho quickly bowed and said, "That's me." Zhang Yan's expression was indifferent as he said, "Go and pacify the people in the city. As long as they don't leave the city, I will be able to protect them." Governor Yang bowed deeply to Zhang Yan and said in admiration, "Taoist Zhang has the will of heaven. On behalf of the people of Chuizhou, I thank you for your kindness." He made up his mind and said, "If this immortal can survive this disaster, I will definitely find a painter to worship him and ensure that his incense will never end." At the same time, Han Sui flew Star Pivot Flying Palace above the monsters. Below the main hall of the flying palace, other than her, there were about 50 disciples, some sitting and some standing. They looked at the monsters below and were all eager to try. These were all her Han clansmen and disciples. They had followed her on this trip to exterminate the demon tribe in exchange for karma. Han Sui looked around and had a plan. She flipped her wrist and took out a set of formation flags. She ordered, Zheng Wan, bring more disciples. Set up a formation about 100 miles from the east to the west. Hearing her order, a beautiful female disciple came forward to receive the order. She moved quickly and picked about 20 disciples in one breath. Then, she brought them out of the palace to set up the formation. Han Suyi's trusted servant girl asked curiously, "Mother, why didn't you lock all 4 sides?" It wasn't hard to kill these small monsters, but if they escaped into the forest, it would be difficult to eradicate them. Han Suyi said calmly, "I see that the Demon King has some skill. It's hard to deal with a trapped beast. I'm not as powerful as Senior Brother Du and Senior Brother Xiao, and I'm not as powerful as Senior Brother Hua, who has the Chen clan to rely on. It's not easy to train these disciples. Now that the demonic calamity is upon us, we need to preserve some of our strength. We can't die here. If we leave a way out ahead, these monsters won't fight us to the death." A look of understanding appeared on the maidservant's face. She suddenly smiled and said, "It's just that with Mother's arrival, it'll be difficult for Manor Head Zhang. He's not like us, coming here alone. I'm afraid he'll be in a mess." Han Sui shook her head and said, "That's where you're wrong. I've seen Junior Brother Zhang's power in the competition. Just wait and see. These monsters won't be able to get past him." Monster King Quan had gathered his guards and was ready to lead his people to fight to the death. But when he saw that the people from Qinsong School weren't in a hurry to surround them, and instead scattered, he was stunned. It was just as Han Sui expected. He didn't have the time to think about what they were thinking. He shouted, "Children, follow me across the river." They were in an open area with nowhere to escape. If they were to fight here, they would definitely be at a disadvantage. However, as long as they entered the human city, he didn't believe that the Ute Song sect would be able to attack without restraint. At that time, they could disperse their troops and escape separately. They could go to the wilderness or to the densely populated areas. That way, they wouldn't be completely annihilated here. At this moment, the dozen or so personal guards of General Han ran back. They cried miserably, "Your Majesty, General Han, General Han." General Han was Quan He's confidant. He thought about the flying palace and felt something was wrong. He shouted, "What happened to General Han?" General Han was killed by a Taoist's lightning. Fiendish demons were afraid of lightning spells. Quan He's heart skipped a beat when he heard that, but then he asked, "Just one person? Did you see it clearly?" The guard said, "Yes, only one person." Quan He suddenly felt a sense of hope. Since there was only one Taoist blocking the way, it was better than dealing with hundreds of Xianmen cultivators behind him, no matter how powerful the opponent was. No matter how strong the opponent was, even if his magic power was high, he could still lead a few dozen guards. Even if he didn't kill the enemy, he could at least force them to retreat and open up a path for his people. After he made up his mind, he waved his hand and gave the order to move forward. Among the tens of thousands of people, there was a rumbling drum. With the rumbling of the drums, tens of thousands of demons shouted in unison and jumped into the long river, rushing towards the other side. The ferocious momentum and the rolling demon clouds made Governor Yang and his subordinates' expressions change. They were worried that Zhang Yan could stop them all by himself. When Zhang Yan saw this scene, he couldn't help but laugh. Senior Sister Han is quite open-minded. Han Suyi's way of handling the situation wasn't good, but it was within the norm. There was nothing wrong with it. If the demons really did rush past him, she would have to bear the consequences. She was confident that Zhang Yan could stop the demons, so she used this method. She was convinced that Zhang Yan could stop the tens of thousands of monsters head-on, so she used this method. Zhang Yan laughed and used his teleportation divine ability. With a single step, he arrived at the bank of the long river and sat down in midair. He shook his shoulders slightly and said, "Rise?" There was a loud sound and a water light that covered the sky flashed behind him. There seemed to be endless waves that rolled on the other side of the river. Ever since he broke out of his shell, his magic power had more than doubled. At this moment, the true light spread out for more than 10,000 feet. Moreover, the water vapor was endless, stirring up the spiritual opportunity. The water of the long river was like a tide, rolling like it was boiling. The demon cultivators that crossed the river were clueless and didn't know how powerful the divine ability was. They screamed and crashed into the water. They couldn't move the water light at all. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared. In just a moment, more than 100 demon cultivators disappeared. Zhang Yan saw that there were still a few demon cultivators who had come ashore but had not fallen into the trap. He let out a shout and activated his first-grade golden core. Under the guidance of the incantation, the fiendish aura circulating around his body instantly turned into rays of true light, trapping all the fish that had slipped through the net. With his full strength, this streak of true light once again extended over 1,000 zhang. Only then did it stop. The sound of water between heaven and earth was loud, filled with the sound of surging waves. If it wasn't for the fact that they personally saw him casting the spell, they would have suspected that the long river had truly burst its banks. With him blocking the demons that came fell into the trap. Yang Taisho and the others were amazed and thought that this was the work of a god. Jiang Zheng was also dazzled. He walked around the mortal world and came into contact with cultivators from other sections. His instinct told him that the teacher who taught him the technique was not ordinary. He was afraid that it was a cultivator from one of the big sections. Now that he saw it, he believed it. Demon King Quan He's face changed. A demon general next to him advised, "King, this Taoist is strong. Why don't we go back and kill him?" Quan He's face was solemn. Seeing Zhang Yan's technique, he knew that he wasn't easy to deal with. No wonder he dared to block the way alone. But if he didn't get rid of this Taoist, his troops would have no way out. He gritted his teeth and said, "Go back? Can we go back? If we go back, we'll die. It's just one person, what's there to be afraid of?" As he spoke, Han Sui saw that Zhang Yan's attack was so loud. She also came out from the flying palace. She made a spell and jade clouds flew out from her body. They were like drops of water from a spring. They didn't stop and covered a few miles of clear sky. She pointed down and the clouds fell down, chasing after the tens of thousands of demons. The small demons didn't know what was going on and were immediately trapped. When the colorful clouds floated past, they were all lying on the ground. This was one of Qinsong School's divine arts. It was called Illusionary Cloud Jade Smoke. This divine art was good for group battles. Anyone who was touched by the jade smoke, those with weaker cultivation would have their senses blocked and they would faint on the spot. Even those with higher cultivation would be blinded and deaf if they didn't have a way to break the light smoke. They wouldn't be able to tell north from south. They would be at the mercy of the enemy. If the smoke didn't go away, no matter how strong you were, you wouldn't be able to use it. Seeing this, Quan He was shocked and angry. There were strong enemies in front and behind him. His tribe was on the brink of destruction. He didn't have time to think. He released a loud roar, his voice piercing through the horizon. Pressing down with his hand, his body suddenly rose to a height of around 300 zhang. He took a step forward, crossing the long river with just a single step. Raising his mountainous palm, he slapped towards Zhang Yan. "Dear, if you think this site is good, please remember to help me promote it." The site. Chapter 410. Quan He's palm strike had the power to destroy a mountain. He wanted to force Zhang Yan away so that the demons behind him could cross the river and rush into Chuizhou City. Zhang Yan smiled and activated his Xian Qi. A golden hand flew out from the top of his head. At first, it was only 10 feet in size, but suddenly, it grew to more than 300 feet. When it reached the top, it was even bigger than Quan He's body. He held Quan He's palm firmly and said, "Demon King Quan is quite strong, and his temper is quite big too." Seeing that their attack had failed, Quan and the Monster King were not surprised. With a loud shout, they flipped their palms and took out a hexagonal golden hammer from somewhere. They waved it and smashed it towards Zhang Yan's head. Zhang Yan circulated the Xian Huang giant palm and met the attack head-on. The might of the Xian Huang giant palm was too great. With a single strike, the Xian Huang giant palm crumbled apart, turning into a clump of yellow mist. Governor Yang and the others who were watching the battle from the watchtower exclaimed in shock. Quan He thought that he had found an opportunity. Although his body was huge, his movements were not slow. He only lifted the golden hammer a little before smashing it down with all his strength. Zhang Yan's expression did not change. He calmly took out a spell and a yellow true light rushed out from the top of his head and collided with the golden hammer. As soon as the two collided, there was a loud explosion. Zhang Yan's body couldn't help but sway, while Quan and the Demon King only felt a strong force coming from their hands. Even with his extraordinary strength, his wrist hurt from the rebound. His body leaned back and he took half a step back. Quan He and the demons behind him saw that their king seemed to be at a disadvantage and roared. Immediately, more than 10 demon generals leaped into the air and rushed over. They wanted to make things difficult for Zhang Yan. These demon cultivators were all wearing helmets and armors. They were armed with weapons and dressed like ordinary generals. Their cultivation was also not bad. All of them were in the core formation realm. If they were warriors, it would be hard for them to not be defeated under the siege of more than 10 peers, not to mention staying where they were. However, Zhang Yan's method was orthodox and his core formation was first grade. With the strength of his core evil, there were very few peers in Shenmen who could be on par with him. Thus, he showed no fear and laughed, "You came at the right time." He scattered the water element true light and a watercolored light shot up into the sky. It was like a barrier in front of him. The two oncoming demon generals could not stop in time. They immediately fell in. The remaining demon generals were shocked. How could they not know how powerful it was? They immediately stopped and took out their divine weapons from tens of feet away. At this time, Quan He had already recovered his breath. He raised his hammer and swung it again. This time, it was a horizontal sweep. Suddenly, a muffled sound of breaking through the air erupted. Immediately, there was a muffled sound of the air breaking. Zhang Yan sneered. The golden hammer fell right on top of the brilliance, but his body only trembled slightly before stabilizing again. He was actually not injured in the slightest. He flicked his sleeves and the aqua light rose again. The moment those divine weapons fell into the water, they were swept away by the water and disappeared without a trace. The demon generals panicked when they saw their weapons falling into the enemy's hands. They desperately tried to use their spells to take back their weapons. However, no matter how hard they tried, their faces turned red but they still could not get any response. Up until now, Zhang Yan had been sitting cross-legged. But at this moment he slowly stood up and stood on top of the cloud. The yellow mist above his head retracted, and the golden hand reformed. He coldly said, "Since you've come, there's no need for you to leave. All of you can stay." Demon King Quan He saw that something was wrong and shouted, "Retreat!" Just now, he was about to wave his golden hammer. However, Zhang Yan stomped his foot and the water element true light surged over. Quan He suddenly felt as if he was being pulled by a tide, as if he was going to be dragged in. He hurriedly stabilized his body and couldn't be bothered to take care of those demon generals. At the same time, Zhang Yan stretched out his hand. The yellow hand expanded to a few hundred feet. Like a cloud that covered the sky, it cast a large haze and grabbed the demon generals. The demon generals were caught off guard and were caught in the palm. Zhang Yan sneered. He used his mana and the 5 fingers of the hand suddenly closed. Only the sound of bones and flesh being crushed could be heard. No matter how strong their cultivation was, under such a grab, they were all tangled up inside and outside. They could no longer save their lives. Originally, these demon generals relied on the sturdiness of their bodies to dare to launch an attack. However, no matter how valiant they were, they couldn't help but be terrified when they saw such a miserable state. The gazes they shot at Zhang Yan were filled with terror, and they hesitated to move forward for a time. At this moment, besides the disciples of the Dark Azure sect, the spectators of the battle from afar were the disciples of numerous small sections. They saw that Zhang Yan was facing the encirclement of over 10 demon cultivators by himself, Yet he beat all of them to the point they didn't have the ability to fight back at all. No matter how ferocious their attacks were, they were easily dealt with, and they didn't retreat in the slightest. One of them, a middle-aged cultivator, exclaimed in admiration, "This fellow Taoist Zhang is truly impressive." A fellow disciple that stood by his side puckered his lips and said as if it was a matter of course, "This fellow Zhang is ranked 9th amongst the top 10 disciples of Qinsong school, so he's naturally extraordinary. Not to mention this fellow Zhang has attained the first-grade core formation, and he's the only one in a few thousand years. He's truly surpassed us by too much, so it's not surprising that he possesses such ability." The middle-aged cultivator from before sighed. He usually thought highly of himself. Even though he'd heard of how formidable the top 10 disciples of Qinsong school were, he'd never experienced it for himself. So he'd always thought that even if they were superior to him, it wasn't difficult for him to catch up to them. But now that he'd experienced it for himself, he really couldn't be compared to them. These demon generals were practically defenseless in front of Zhang Yan, but if they fought him, it would take a lot of effort to take him down. If he had to fight two of them, he could only think of ways to kill one of them, and that was under the premise that they didn't have any treasures with them. Song Hong from Linqing Monastery had come with the crowd. He'd met Zhang Yan once before, and now that he saw the figure in front of him, his clothes fluttering in the wind, he couldn't help but sigh. He thought to himself, Qinsong school is indeed a great sect with 10,000 years of history, and its foundation is deep. If someone like senior brother Zhang is ranked 9th in the sect, I wonder how powerful the others who are ranked above him are? He subconsciously glanced at Han Sui. When this woman attacked, it was like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. She'd made hundreds and thousands of small demons collapse to the ground. She was also very powerful. She was also very methodical. Up until now, all the movements of the Quanta tribe had been under her control. She was quite good at strategizing. But from what everyone could see, no matter how many times Han Sui attacked, she was only dealing with small demons. Zhang Yan was fighting the Archfiend King and a group of demon generals by himself. Compared to him, Han Sui's performance was a bit lacking. Huoxian had written a letter to the head of Linqing Monastery, saying that he could help the sect fight against the demons together. Song Hong, who was the head disciple of the sect, didn't agree to this, but now he had another idea. He thought to himself, I'll have to discuss this with my master when I get back. Quan and the Archfiend King saw their people being killed by Zhang Yan, and they couldn't take it anymore. They roared and used their true power. He opened his mouth and spat out a bright light. A fist-sized, perfectly round, and flawless golden bead flew out and shot towards Zhang Yan. At such a close distance, the golden pearl arrived in practically an instant, and it smashed onto Zhang Yan's chest with a bang, causing the fine light on his clothes to shake violently and be on the verge of dispersing. Zhang Yan waved his hand and stopped the light, but he was slightly surprised. It has to be known that his treasured robe was a profound artifact. Even if it went up against a divine ability, it would still be able to block it. However, he didn't expect that with one attack from this magic treasure, it would almost shatter the treasure light. Although it wasn't enough to truly injure him, the opponent's item was already extremely powerful. Quan He was even more shocked in his heart. This was an innate magic treasure that he'd nurtured himself, and it possessed the ability to shatter metal. Every time he used it, its might would decrease by a level until it was completely useless. In the past, he'd never used it lightly, and he'd only utilized it because he had no other choice. He didn't expect that even this couldn't do anything to Zhang Yan. At this moment, he also realized that the other party had such a robe to protect him, and it was impossible for him to force him to retreat. Quan He said fiercely, "Fellow Taoist, I don't want to fall out with your Qinsong school. If you open the door today and let us go, then we can talk. Otherwise I, Quan He, am not a pushover. Let's fight to the death today." Zhang Yan didn't care about such threats and said with a smile, "I need a spirit beast to guard the door. Is Archfiend King Quan willing to come?" Quan He stared at Zhang Yan with his red eyes. Behind him, more and more small demons fell under the illusionary cloud jade smoke. He couldn't help but feel a little impatient. He shouted, "Fight!" and spat out an ink-like chi. As soon as the chi came out, it caused a whirlpool and a boundless black wind. Countless fine grains of sand danced back and forth in the wind. This wind was extremely strange. The originally clear sky was immediately obscured, and the sun and moon lost their light. Not only did the spectators standing at the back feel their minds go blank with just a glance, they became muddle-headed. There were a few people with low cultivation who, if not for their fellow sect members holding them back, would have fallen off the clouds. The wind was a breath of foul chi that Quan He cultivated by borrowing the yin chi from the ground. Once it was used, it could confuse the mind and soul. Quan He hid himself in the wind and retracted his tall figure. He stretched out his hand and grabbed 100 or so clansmen with decent cultivation base. Without saying a word, he fled outside. Seeing that there was no way for him to kill his way out of Zhang Yan, he first put on a show and then released the bewildering wind. He didn't hope to injure the enemy, but only hoped to delay him for a while. With the help of the bewildering wind, he could use it to conceal himself and then quietly escape. Han Sui frowned. She pressed on the armrest and said, "How can this demon use demonic arts? There must be a reason behind it." If it was 3 years ago, Zhang Yan wouldn't have many ways to deal with the black wind. But now, it wasn't a problem for him. He pointed with his hand and a bolt of lightning appeared. The purple light flew out and made a series of thunderclaps. The black mist was forcefully swept away. He turned around and just happened to see Quan He's figure leaving. He suddenly shouted, "Quan He, you've lost today. Quickly put down your weapon and surrender." He had already used some strength in his shout. Quan He, who was the first to receive the attack, immediately felt dizzy and his body trembled. Zhang Yan took out the incantation gesture, and as he moved his Xian Qi, he raised a long yellow light and pressed down on the other party's body. Casting recommendation votes, monthly votes, etc. Chapter 411. At this moment, Demon King Quan was not in the mood to continue fighting and did not want to be entangled with the ground. Therefore, he did not dodge Zhang Yan's true light. In his heart, he planned to take it head-on and buy some time to escape with his men. His original plan was not bad. He was a cultivator of the strength path. Even if he suffered some injuries, he did not care. However, when the true light came down, he was shocked. His back sank and his body became shorter. It was as if he was carrying a mountain on his back. Under the pressure of this huge force, he felt disgust in his chest and a fishy smell entered his throat. He was about to fall from the sky. He knew that he could not resist this force. At this moment, he did not care about escaping. He quickly let out a roar and grew his body again. His feet stepped on the ground and arched upwards. His courage and blood surged up. He wanted to use his strength to push the true light away. He did not believe that even if there was a mountain behind him, he would use all his strength to push it away. Zhang Yan saw that he was not willing to surrender and smiled. He was not in a hurry to take him down. As long as he was suppressed by his true light, he would not be able to easily struggle out unless his opponent's cultivation realm was higher than his. He lightly activated his Dan Sha and calmly activated his Xian Qi. He continuously created true light of the earth element, one after another, and pressed down on Quan He. The brilliance was originally a faint yellow light. However, as more and more true force was accumulated, it gradually turned into a dark yellow color. It was like the accumulation of rocks and stones, and the mountains were stacked on top of each other. Under his true light of the earth element, even Su Yihong was defeated in the past. Moreover, his cultivation level was much higher than before. No matter how Quan He struggled, he could not get rid of the mountain on top of him. Under his pressure, Quan He's body became lower and lower. After a while, his knees bent, his body leaned forward, and both his hands were on the ground. He was the Demon King. Although his body was being pressed down, he raised his head to the sky. The veins on his forehead were bulging and his expression was ferocious. He kept roaring like a trapped beast and refused to lower his head. At this moment, Zhang Yan's expression was calm, without a trace of anger. The demeanor of a Taoist master formed a stark contrast with the Demon King's hoarse appearance. With Zhang Yan blocking the front, Han Sui easily took down the monster cultivators in the rear. Even those small demons that had fled after seeing that the situation was not good were driven back one by the formation flags. Han Sui sent her disciples out to capture the monsters that had some cultivation and bind them up. She didn't bother with the lesser monsters that hadn't transformed. She left them to her disciples to deal with. Usually, these disciples envied their masters and fellow disciples for having monsters guarding their immortal's cave and ordering them around. Although the cultivation of these little demons was a little weak, it was exactly what they wanted. As for the rest, he casually killed them. Even the cultivators from the small sects who were watching the battle acted together. In less than an hour, the entire spring diagram demon division had vanished into thin air, no longer existing. At this time, under the true earth light, Quan He's entire body was emitting creaking sounds. It seemed like he couldn't take it anymore. At this moment, he wasn't trying to escape, but to struggle for his life. He knew very well that the force on his back was unimaginable. If he let his guard down, he could be crushed into a pile of minced meat. He grumbled in his heart. If this continued, he would only be waiting for death. He rolled his eyes and shouted, "Taoist, please, please let go. I'm willing to be the spirit beast guarding the immortal's cave." Zhang Yan heard that although his words were intermittent, as if they were being choked out from his throat, he could tell that the demon still had some strength. Moreover, his words were said unwillingly. It was clear that he didn't want to give up and was still trying to escape. He sneered, "Although Demon King Quan has such intentions, you are a demon lord after all. Your wild nature is hard to tame. You need to be taught a lesson before I can accept you." Quan He saw that Zhang Yan wasn't going to let go, so he had no choice but to grit his teeth and keep quiet. After holding on for a while, he squeezed out the last bit of strength in his body. Sweat poured down like rain, his face turned from red to white, and his body trembled violently. Just as he was about to die under the true light, a jade smoke flew over from afar. When it was near, the smoke dispersed and Han Sui's elegant figure was revealed. She turned her hand and retracted the auspicious smoke around her. She called out softly, "Junior brother Zhang, spare him." Zhang Yan looked back and smiled. "Senior sister Han, why are you pleading for this demon?" Han Sui bowed to Zhang Yan and said sternly, "This demon used a demonic technique just now. This is a little strange. I see that junior brother Zhang is still holding back. Why don't we capture him first and hand him over to senior brother Hua?" Zhang Yan didn't mind. Seeing that Quan He had no more strength left, he waved his sleeve and retracted the true light. He said loudly, "Since senior sister Han has spoken, I will spare this demon's life for now." Quan He was already at the end of his rope, so when the true light disappeared, he collapsed on the ground, panting. Han Sui's expression didn't change, but she was secretly shocked. Junior brother Zhang's Dao technique is very strange. I wonder where he learned it from. She thought about it for a while before letting it go. It was not rare for the disciples of the Taoist sect to obtain a few mysterious Taoist techniques when they were traveling outside. For example, there were more than 10,000 cultivators in the Yuzong sect, but for those who could become the top 10 disciples, how could they be lacking in opportunities? Zhang Yan looked up and saw that there was not a single demon standing in his field of vision. He pondered for a moment and said, "Senior sister Han, although the Quanta division has been eliminated, there are still 2 divisions heading east and west. If we chase them back and forth, it will delay our journey. Why don't we split up? It would be best if we can take them down before they attack the city." Han Sui thought for a while and felt that it was a good idea, so she nodded and said, "Junior brother Zhang is right. Let's split up. I heard that Yi Jie tribe is slightly stronger than the other 2. Junior brother, you should do more work, so I'll leave this tribe to you. What do you think?" Zhang Yan didn't mind. Even if Han Sui didn't come, with his absolute space sword, he could take care of Quanta tribe. It would just take a little more effort. Dealing with Yi Jie tribe, which was weaker than him, was a piece of cake. He nodded and said, "That's good." He waved his sleeves and retracted the water element true light. In the blink of an eye, he floated to the top of the city wall and said to the subordinate, Jiang Zheng, I still lack a few people in this flying palace. Follow me. Jiang Zheng's heart was in turmoil. He knelt down and said happily, Disciple obeys master's order. Zhang Yan waved his hand, and an irresistible force pulled him up. He rose into the sky and took him to the flying palace. Han Suyi's ribbon twirled around her, and she turned into smoke. Then she disappeared. Governor Yang and his subordinates saw them leave. They all knelt on the ground and thanked them for their kindness. Yang Taisho suddenly thought of something. He didn't care about kneeling and hurriedly shouted, Immortal Elder, please tell me your name, he called a few times, but there was no reply. He was disappointed. An advisor squeezed through the crowd and came to the front. He said, Sir, don't worry. I know the Immortal Elder's name. Yang Taisho tilted his head and saw that the aide was the one who suggested the drowning plan, but at this moment, he had no time to ask how this person escaped from the bindings. He asked curiously, How did you know? Could it be that you know this immortal? The advisor immediately said, No, I just saw this immortal elder talking to the female immortal. Although I don't know what the two immortal elders were talking about, I have good eyesight and am good at reading lips. If I'm not wrong, this Taoist elder should be surnamed Zhang. He said it modestly, but his words were full of confidence. Yang Taisho thought about it carefully and felt that it was indeed very likely. But on the surface, he shook his head repeatedly and sighed. How can such guesses be counted? This is a serious matter. If I write the wrong name and annoy the immortal elder, it won't be good. Forget it. The aide instantly became anxious, and he suddenly stepped forward and grabbed Governor Yang's sleeve as he said in a sonorous voice, My lord, this lowly official is willing to use my life to guarantee that this judgment is absolutely correct. Governor Yang laughed and said, Mr. Chiu, I believe you. The advisor immediately came back to his senses. The governor was afraid that he wouldn't be able to bear the responsibility, so he played a trick and asked him to take the lead. However, he didn't really care. As long as the governor approved of him, it was fine. He chuckled and retreated to the side. After Zhang Yan and Han Suyi left Weeping Province, they sent their flying palaces to search for the other two monster tribes. Those two tribes weren't as strong as Quanta tribe, and with the two of them working together, they were wiped out in less than half a day. After wiping out the three tribes, they didn't stay outside and returned to the mountain to report. Han Suyi and Zhang Yan parted ways at Clear Nether Lake and went to Ten Peaks Mountain to see Huoxian. Huoxian ordered a maid to bring her in. After she sat down, he slowly said, Junior apprentice sister, you've worked hard. Han Suyi bowed and said, I'm willing to work for senior apprentice brother. It's not hard. Huoxian's expression couldn't help but change slightly when he saw her bitter expression, and he couldn't help but want to say something. But he didn't say anything in the end, and he changed the topic. Junior sister, may I know which realm junior brother Zhang has cultivated to? Hearing that, Han Suyi's face looked disappointed. After all, she was a disciple of the celestial sect of wonders. After slightly organizing her emotions, her heart was as calm as still water, and she returned to her previous cold appearance. She continued, according to what senior brother said earlier, junior brother Zhang has only practiced the divine lightning of violet sky for 3 years. However, from the side today, I can see that junior brother Zhang has already achieved small success in this divine ability. With this kind of cultivation aptitude, not to mention that I can't compare to him, even compared to eldest senior brother from back then, he isn't much inferior. Huoxian was silent for a while, then sighed, That's all there is to a genius. Han Suyi shook her head and said, Senior apprentice brother, junior apprentice brother Zhang is not bad, but he is still a master and a disciple. You value him more than you value a disciple of an aristocratic family. I heard a few elders in the family talk about you. Huoxian didn't seem to care. He waved his hand and sneered, Let them say what they want. How can these short-sighted people know what I'm planning? You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.